be alive, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome to the meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. The agenda, papers and other relevant information for the meeting are available for the public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Please remember your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record the meeting, providing that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. There's no one. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and make background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silence. Welcome to all those in attendance. I'll now ask Mrs. Gibbons to introduce all the officers.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name's Kelly Gibbons and I'm the Acting Development Management Service Manager. To my left, I have Georgina Coley, who will be providing our legal advice today. To my right, we have Paul McKim, who is our Interim Head of Planning and Building Control. I also have Katie Jones, who is here on behalf of the Local Highway Authority. Ollie Jones is presenting item 6 on the agenda, and joining us later today we will have Rebecca Gemman for item 7, Elsie Morgan for item 8 and Matthew Nielsen for item 9. Thank you.
Right, thank you. We'll now go to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. We've received apologies from Councillor Powell, Councillor Toynbee in attendance to observe the meeting. Will be in. Right. Name substitutes. I do not have any name substitutes. No. 3, declarations of interest. Can anyone indicate whether they wish to declare an interest? There are none. Right, we'll go on now to the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of December 2023. Are the minutes of the meeting of the 13th of December 2023 approved? Please, members raise their hands to indicate that they are. For those in favour of the minutes. Any against?
I was only here for half the meeting.
Oh. Right. No abstentions? One abstention. Yeah, Councillor Gennard. That's carried then. Right, I have no chairman's announcement. We'll now move on to the first item, decision item 6 on the agenda. Can I request the public speakers present in the person for item 6, Mr. Page, Mr. Whitehorn and Mr. Smith, please take their seats in the public participation tables. Good morning and welcome to the meeting. I will call you to speak after the officer's presentation. Get on the right page. Can I now ask Mr. Ollie Jones, who will make the presentation for this particular item?
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to members. First of all, I'd like to thank those members who visited the site yesterday afternoon. Hopefully that was a useful exercise in contextualising the site. So, as shown on the slide, this is an outline planning application for a sustainable urban extension comprising up to 250 dwellings, open space, allotments and landscaping, school expansion land, areas of play, sustainable urban drainage infrastructure, internal roads and associated infrastructure. So the detailed approval is sought for the means of access, and layout, with all other matters reserved for future consideration. The next slide, please. I would first of all draw members' attention to the committee update sheet. There are a number of updates that supplement the published report. So just quickly touch upon those, but again, we will sort of cover those where relevant throughout the presentation. So yesterday, updated comments were received from the Integrated Care Board, so that's previously known as the Clinical Commissioning Group. Those are appended to the update sheet in Appendix 1, and in respect of the contributions sought, the draft Section 106 heads of terms has been updated to reflect that, and again forms part of the updates. So just to clarify that this is not a new contribution, but has been provided on the basis of the reduced number of dwellings down to 250 from that previously provided on the basis of the application being for up to 500. So the cost per floor area has increased, so that again is updated within. Just on that point as well, and just to clarify, it's worth pointing out that there are no contributions sought from the Wye Valley Trust. So in terms of contributions towards Hereford County Hospital, they withdrew their contributions, and that's in relation to sort of challenges that have been made elsewhere with respect to contributions in that regard. There's also a response provided in the update to the applicant's agent response in relation to the latest local highway authority comments. Again, we will touch on that throughout the presentation, but just to confirm that condition 36 has been removed, and some commentary is provided on that. And it just covers, again, in response to the applicant's agent's response, the matter relating to additional transport contributions being sought to deliver improvements along the A44 footway. Again, there's just some clarification with respect to the correct list of local plan policies, and again, some corrections and clarifications with 3 paragraphs within the report. And again, in terms of an updated draft heads of terms table as well, which covers those points as set out. Next slide, please. So this just shows the approximate location of the site with respect to Bromyard. The next slide, if we could have that please, shows the extent of the site location edged in red. So just shy of 12 hectares, and essentially wraps around the northwestern tip of Bromyard. So you can see the open countryside to the west, the River Froome, A44 running along the south, and then Upper Hardwick Lane, which is taken from the A44 and sort of essentially dissects the site. And then that leads to Hardwick Bank Cottages to the north. And then Stonehouse Farm sits to the southwest rather, so just just below below the word track. And then you can see sort of existing residential development to the west of Bromyard along Winslow Road. So you've got Brocksash Close, Flaggoners Close, Hardwick Close, Dampton Tree Close and Cherry Tree Close, which abut the site to the south and the east. And to the eastern end of the site, adjacent to the site, is St Peter's Primary School, marked school on the map. Site's not subject to any landscape designations. There are no designated heritage assets on the site or within immediately close proximity. Tree preservation has been served on a number of trees throughout the site. These were identified on the site yesterday, and again, we will touch upon those where relevant throughout the course of the presentation today. So have the next slide, please. So this is the full site layout. Again, just to highlight, we're considering at this stage access and layout. There is a sort of clearer plan next, but essentially this just shows the vehicular access taken from the A44 to the south, with immediate land to the to south of the road of Stonehouse Farm, between that road and A44 being reserved for drainage infrastructure and planting. And thereafter the main spine road is flanked by a 2 metre footway to the west and a 3 metre shared foot and cycleway to the east. And that meanders through the site, forming a principal street, with the cycle and footway linking through to Cherry Tree Close and providing thereafter onward connections to the school, the primary school and the town centre. The site layout features green infrastructure and open space. Proposed play provision is envisaged to come forward in the way of leaps and neeps, so that's local equipment area for play and neighbourhood equipped areas for play. And you can see on the site plan that these are located around the site by way of, trim trails and forming a play on the way function. So also shown is allotments, community gardens, landscaping and the school expansion land to the east, adjacent to St Peter's Primary School. The layout indicates higher density development along the main spine road and then lower density clusters off this towards the site's edges and the open countryside beyond. So largely responding to the existing field patterns and where possible, green infrastructure is retained. You will see as well that taking account of the site's topography, drainage infrastructure in the way of attenuation features are proposed to the northwestern part of the site and to the south close to the point of access of the A44. If you're on the next slide, this is a lot clearer and shows the apportioning of land throughout the site. So in blue you can see it's slightly clearer now the spine road, the principal vehicular access, and how that spine road sort of meanders through the site. And then off that you have sort of secondary residential roads serving those various clusters of development highlighted in brown. And then it's useful again in contextualising and illustrating that the amount of site apportioned to green infrastructure and open space. So you have a sort of large amount within the central portion of the site, but then around the site's edges as well. And also, as mentioned, between the A44 and the road to Stonehouse Farm. And then in pink to the far east, you can see again the location of the land reserved for school expansion. Next slide, please. So this just shows pedestrian access points together with the vehicular access relative to existing roads and footways and public rights of way. So again, sole vehicular access indicated to be taken from the A44, and that's just indicated by the light blue SA arrow to the far southwest, so the bottom left part of the site. Pedestrian access provided from the site via and across up Hardwick Lane through Flagginers Close to Winslow Road. That's marked by the green P, and the connections there are shown in blue. And then to the east of the site, as discussed, the cycle and pedestrian access being provided through the school expansion land to Cherry Tree Close, and that's marked by the blue PC symbol next to the school to the east of the site. And then you've also got connections to the existing public right-of-way network, both to the north, so down towards the River Froome, into open countryside, but then also as well into Dams and Tree Close, and that's where members will recall we walked along towards the end of the visit yesterday. Next slide, please. So just to go through some photographs of the site. These show the point of vehicular access to the site taken from the A44. So members will be aware that the site slopes in a northerly direction from the A44. And this is the area that we reserved for sort of drainage infrastructure and planting. No residential development proposed in this location within the submitted layout. And on the photos are circled some of the trees that are subject to the tree preservation order that's been served. I understand that to be an apple tree there. Next slide. So now we're standing on Upper Hardwick Lane in the sort of southern portion of the site, where Upper Hardwick Lane makes two bends. So we're looking west now from Upper Hardwick Lane across the site, so looking along the access to Stonehouse Farm. And it's in this point in which the spine road would cross that road. And then to the immediate right of that photograph, so just to the right along that hedgerow, is where the pedestrian access would be taken from the site, and we'll show a plan to illustrate that shortly. And the bottom photograph just looks north along Upper Hardwick Lane. The left of the shot shows the western portion of the site, and then to the right are the rear of those properties that flank that are along Hardwick Close, Flagoners Close. So there is some sort of rear access to those. I know that it was pointed out yesterday with respect to the levels differential there. Condition 12 deals with site levels, and that's a pre-commencement condition, and again those sort of matters would be dealt with in terms of scale as part of the RM. Next slide, please. So top photograph looks north along the south rather along the western portion of the site. So Stonehouse Farm visible in the distance, and you'll see a group of trees again that form part of that tree preservation order to be retained as part of the layout. That includes sort of oak, ash and larch. So they would be retained and again would form part of the area allocated within the site for allotment provision. And then the bottom photograph, we look east from the access to Stonehouse Farm along Upper Hardwick Lane. So we were stood there yesterday. The red arrow indicates the link to Flagoners Close, proposed as part of the pedestrian access. The next slide will touch upon the role of this in delivering the pedestrian access to and from the site. So if we get on the next slide now, thank you. So at this juncture, just worth then to point out the sort of access and pedestrian connections at this sort of southern portion of the site. So circled are just some sort of key points really. We've got a 3-arm signalised junction taken from the A44 to serve the site. As part of a traffic regulation order, the speed limit, 30 mile an hour, would be extended to the west, so changing the environment of the road in that particular area on approach to Bromyard from the west. And then you have a 6-metre carriageway providing access to the site and forming the spine road, which north of the Stonehouse Farm link would provide a 2-metre footway to the west, and then you have the 3-metre cycle and footway running through the spine road to the eastern side. So in purple, you can see, as discussed, the 2-metre footway link, which comes out onto Upper Hardwick Lane. There would be formalisations of the bend in Upper Hardwick Lane to facilitate that in terms of crossing provision. And there you can see that it leads then to Flagoners Close, and again we walked down there yesterday, and then leading onto Winslow Road and providing a connection down Winslow Road to the junction with the A44. So the final details, as I've said, of that would come forward as part of section 278 and also TRO, traffic regulation order, as well. Next slide, please. So now we're towards the eastern part of the site, and specifically focusing on the area that's apportioned to the land that would be transferred for school expansion land associated with St. Peter's Primary School. So as set out in the report, the Section 106 agreement secures the requirement for the developer to transfer the land to the primary school. If, after all reasonable endeavours, that's not possible, then contributions would be paid in lieu to facilitate improvements to the school. But the school is situated, as I said, to the northern end of Cherry Tree Close. And as shown by the red arrow, that's the approximate, again, location in terms of that 3-metre foot and cycleway link leading from the site and providing those onward connections into Bromyard. And then the bottom photo, again, I've just highlighted, again, in terms of approximately in purple is the location of the existing public right-of-way, again, that we walked down yesterday towards the end of the visit. And obviously the scheme, the layout of the scheme makes reference to that and utilises that as a secondary connection and providing a link to Dams and Tree Close as well. Next slide, please. So now towards the central part of the site, and it's in this area in which large amounts of public open space is proposed. Looking north at the top, again, trees to be retained. Worth pointing out that the trees that are covered by the TPO that has been served do not raise any sort of specific conflict with the layout as submitted. Residential development has been laid out here to provide natural surveillance over the public open space. You can see the southern boundary beyond is flanked by the sort of two-storey residential properties along Hardwick Close. And then marked in blue as well is the existing public right-of-way that leads onto Upper Hardwick Lane. So you can see those trees at the bottom of the slide are those that flank Upper Hardwick Lane. Next slide. So this one here, again, we're looking at the school expansion land, and the row of trees and hedgerows to the left form a retained tree and hedgerow boundary. Again, that forms part of the TPO, so that the layout has been designed to accommodate that and retain it to provide a corridor there. And then the bottom photo again shows another tree covered by the TPO, an ash tree there along the northern boundary, and we're looking sort of in northwesterly direction towards Upper Hardwick cottages, and just noting the levels there falling away towards that and the open countryside beyond. Next slide, please. And final set of photographs. No, not the final set of photographs, there's one more. This shows the northeastern corner of the site. And it's here in which the community gardens would be proposed. And again, trees as well to be retained, again, sort of forming a landscape buffer around the site. And then the final set. So this is just the southern extremity of the western portion of the site. The top looks southwest over the river through Barley, and then the bottom looks east along the southern boundary towards Upper Hardwick Lane. And it's in this location in which the layout apportions land for the surface water attenuation feature. Next slide, please. So to touch on the main considerations then for consideration, these are listed and reflect those that are discussed within the officer report. Members will be aware that the site forms part of a strategic site identified by policy BY2 of the core strategy, would provide for a comprehensively planned urban extension to Bromyard, and therefore the proposals can be considered acceptable as a matter of principle. In terms of design and layout, the scheme broadly takes account of existing field patterns where possible and provides a mix of densities and the formation of a street hierarchy with clusters of development appropriately located in context of public open space and other retained green infrastructure and corridors. Scale, appearance and landscaping would be considered as part of any forthcoming reserve matters application. As members again will be aware, a lot of consideration has been given to access, highway safety and connectivity arrangements associated with the development. The submission is able to demonstrate a safe vehicular access off the A44, and the internal layout provides appropriate visibility, although some further details would be required by way of condition as set out within the report, and again accompanying any further reserve matters applications. The changes to Upper Hardwick Lane would be made where it is dissected by the Spine Road, so just to again cover that, that includes the formalisation of the bend, and in terms of the provision of bollards as well, to prohibit that being used as a through route. But nevertheless, access would still be retained for the properties that the rear of the properties along Hardwick Close and Flagners Close. 3-metre pedestrian cycleway run through along the Spine Road from its junction with Stonehouse Farm, linking with Cherry Tree Close, and again providing links and sustainable connections to the primary school, and thereafter the town centre and the service and amenities afforded within it. Next slide, please. So again, this just shows the pedestrian connections that would be via Flagners Close and then onto Winslow Road. I know we walked along there yesterday, and that's those shown in purple. These have been subject to a positive road safety audit. There is a shorter link available via the steps onto Broxash Close, although this is not necessarily an accessible route for all. And again, members will have been made aware of that yesterday. So nevertheless, in considering the implications of the more direct sort of as the crow flies route via up Hardwick Lane and the A44 to the facilities at the junction of the A44 and Panniers Lane and the Queen Elizabeth High School, that's shown in yellow. In response to the local highway authority concerns, additional contributions are sought to enable the local highway authority to provide improvements along up Hardwick Lane and the A44 between Hardwick Lane and Winslow Road. So when having regard to that, as discussed within the report and the update to the report, it is considered that the proposal is acceptable from a highway safety and connectivity perspective, again as considered within the report. Next slide, please. So just touching upon landscape and visual impact, again, this is covered at length within the report, but it's considered that the landscape impacts, whilst there would obviously be a notable visual change, that they would be localised and harmonious with the existing settlement edge. Again, the details of landscaping and engineering can be addressed through the reserve matters stage, but we're officers satisfied and are comfortable with the layout that's been deposited that allows for that green infrastructure to come forward as part of the reserve matters relating to landscaping, and again having regard to the retained green infrastructure. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this just shows the illustrative landscape master plan and shows again how the layout is designed to take account of retained infrastructure that we've looked at, but also including those that are subject to the tree preservation order. That includes 12 trees and 4 groups of trees, but it also facilitates additional planting as well. And again, just to emphasise, that would come forward at a later stage. Next slide, please. So in terms of open space, more than 3.5 hectares of green infrastructure, which includes the opportunities for equipped play, and again, sort of trim trail equipment as set out, so play on the way features. So rather than a sort of centralised formal arrangement, it would be encouraged that through sort of trim trails around the site, that there would be sort of a play on the way function that's close to those residential clusters. The Section 106 agreement secures the requirement, and the layout again is such which creates public open space and green infrastructure corridors throughout the scheme, with natural surveillance as well. Conditions and reserve matters would secure the detail of those elements. Next slide, please. So just to touch on some of the other points, in terms of public right-of-way, diversion would be required of the existing public right-of-way. In terms of the impact on residential amenity, it's appreciated that some of the residential development is close to existing development off Winslow Road. The separation distances are considered acceptable, but nevertheless the reserve matters would deal with the scale to ensure that there's a satisfactory relationship there, and details of levels would be forthcoming as part of a pre-commencement condition. And then conditions also deal with noise management, noise mitigation and construction management so especially through sort of construction phases as well. Drainage, the site is not at risk of flooding. Surface water drainage strategy is considered acceptable in principle, but that's subject to further details on those attenuation features and how they would operate. Consideration also would be given to maximising infiltration where possible throughout the site. But condition 6 secures details of maintenance and management as well of those features. Welsh Water advised that hydraulic modelling would be required in terms of the capacity in terms of foul water. Obviously the site would connect to the mains, but hydraulic modelling, as I said, needs to be undertaken to ascertain where that link would be and whether or not any sort of improvements would need to be made. I know that representations have also raised concern about water supply in terms of potable water. That is something that's governed by the Water Industry Act, so there's not any sort of safeguarding condition in that regard, but that's something that the developer will need to deal with in any case. In terms of ecology, an updated ecology assessment was submitted. There's an extensive history of survey work that has been undertaken for the site, given the length in which the application has been under consideration. In short, the proposal is considered acceptable, subject to safeguarding, management and enhancement conditions that are set out within the report. The site is located within the catchment of the River Lug, as members will be aware. An allocation of phosphate credits to make the development nutrient neutral has been made. Herefordshire Council are exploring sort of a phased approach to credits, and that's set out within the draft section 106. But that's dependent on the council's progression of wetlands. But nevertheless, a positive HRA has been undertaken with Natural England concurring with the local planning authority's conclusions in that regard. And then just a few more things to touch upon on the next slide. So in terms of considering how the development addresses climate change, the site is located in a sustainable location to encourage sustainable and active travel, as discussed in terms of the pedestrian connectivity and cycle provision, retention of green infrastructure and new planting, public open space, provides environmental benefits in that regard. The applicants also submitted an energy and sustainability statement which sets out measures which could come forward as part of any reserved matters application. So it would be at that stage in terms of the actual scale, appearance and sort of landscaping that we could consider that further. In terms of housing, there's a policy compliant mix of affordable housing with up to 50% affordable, so 40% will be secured through the Section 106 agreement with 10% additionality grant funded units coming forward. Those are tender neutral at this stage, but would be subject to further consultation with housing and the local planning authority. But the housing mix generally responds to local need, as set out within the latest housing market area needs assessment, with considerations for accessibility and an even distribution across the site to create a balanced and inclusive community which responds to that local need. And then just to again review the infrastructure and Section 106 contributions, which will be sought for primary and community healthcare, education, which includes the land transfer to St Peter's Primary School to allow for the expansion, waste and recycling, transport, so public realm and active travel measures, and the delivery of the A44 improvement footways. Libraries, sports provision, and the purchase of the requisite phosphate credits, and also securing the minimum open space requirement. So this would nevertheless provide demonstrable benefits to the wider community, and this is especially in acknowledgement of the strains that have been cited within the received representations in certain areas within Bromyard. Just other matters, I mean, that they're covered within the report. I think the key one was with respect to the loss of view. As members will no doubt be aware, there is no right to a private view. But again, in terms of the reserved matters submission in dealing with scale would seek to ensure that there's an appropriate residential relationship between the site and existing properties. So just to wrap up then, the proposal is considered to demonstrate broad compliance with the requirements of policy BY2 of the core strategy and the other principal policies relevant to the determination of the application within the development plan. The proposal would provide housing in a sustainable location identified within the plan, giving rise to social and economic benefits. These include an acceptable mix of housing. Financial contributions would be secured to address local infrastructure capacity issues, particularly with respect to education and healthcare. So helping to address those known pressures. A land for expansion of St Peter's Primary School would be made available. The environmental impacts of the scheme are considered such that could be managed again through the reserve matters and or conditions where relevant. And the phosphate credits would make the development nutrient neutral. So in the round, the proposal is considered to accord with the policies of the development plan, and there are considered no other significant material considerations which indicate that a decision should be made other than for approval. So if you go to the next slide, we have the recommendation. So it's subject to the completion of Section 106 agreement within 6 months of the date of the committee to secure the contributions as set out and required, and the purchase of phosphate credits, again in full or phased. That outline planning permission be granted, subject to the following conditions as set out in the report, and any other further conditions or variations thereof considered necessary, by officers named in the scheme of delegation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, for a very thorough presentation. Can I now invite the public speakers? Can I invite Mr. Page to speak on behalf of Bromyard Town Council and Winslow Town Council? You have 3 minutes.
Chair, members, good morning. My name is Councillor Roger Page, Vice Chair of the Planning and Economic Development Committee of Bromyard and Winslow Town Council. This application has been a roller coaster for our Town Council. At first, we were not able to support due to the inclusion of the A44 pedestrian footway. Then, following the refusal of the Gladman application to the south on the grounds of the impossibility of making this footway safe and no designated cycleway, by this committee in October, the Hardwick Bank applicant removed this footway from their plans, so hence we could support. However, following this in early December, we discovered that the LHA had introduced a 3 metre wide strip on the access spine road to facilitate a third party at condition 36. Yet again, we had no choice than to oppose the application unless that imposition was removed, which it was, as it was ultra-virus. And we wrote to all members of this committee, and hey presto, this condition 36 was removed. So again, we were able to support. However, being diligent, we discovered a new additional requirement placed on the applicant to stamp up a Section 106 in lieu of a Section 278 to pay for improving this very same stretch of the A44 from Upper Hardwick Lane to Winslow Road, contrary to your October decision, which brings us back to opposing unless this demand is removed at 7.3.5 heads of terms, Section 106 contributions by this committee today. It is sad, Chair. Who would be a town councillor at the bottom of the local government food chain, voluntarily trying to do our best for our community when we are treated with such disdain, when strokes are pulled to override democratic consultation? Condition 36 has been removed, but in effect reintroduced as a Section 106 extra contribution. We can only request that this committee support our position by removing today this offending 106 demand placed unfairly on the applicants and granting consent for the strategic site which has gone nowhere since 2016. We need housing in Bromyard with safe access. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll now invite Councillor Mr. Whitehorn to speak on in objection to the application. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I am Mark Whitehorn, the Emeritus Professor of Analytics at Dundee University, so I've spent my lifetime analysing data. Until about 2 weeks ago, I also supported this application. I really did. Bromyard needs housing. However, I was made aware that the LHS was requesting changes which, in my opinion, encourage people to walk along the A44, a route that we have consistently argued is dangerous. So I can only support this application if this is removed. Essentially, the LHA is requiring the developer to provide funds to upgrade the footway on a section of the A44. That section is known to us all. It was discussed last October with Gladman's application, and it was a major factor in the refusal of the application. So I will try and answer 4 questions. Why is this section of the A44 dangerous? We discussed this last October. It is basically too narrow. It's constrained, it cannot be any wider. And if you take a 2.5 metre section out of that width for footway, you are left with the section of carriageway that is not wide enough to allow 2 large lorries to pass. What they then do is they mount the curb. This is the bottom line. There's no way round this. Nobody has ever come up with a way round this. Can it be fixed? No, it can't, because there are these constraints. This has been discussed for years. What reason does the LHA give for this request? It says essentially that the applicant's proposed pedestrian route is too long and that people will use this section of the A44 because it's the shortest route between the site exit and basically the rest of Bromyard, you know, the dentist, the school. So they're saying that that route is too long. And what they're saying is that this route is the shortest route, and people naturally go for the shortest route, especially children. Well, actually, it isn't the shortest route. That's not true. Vista's proposed route is 380 metres. The A44 route is 324, which is shorter. But the shortest route, which you saw yesterday, I gather, which is through the car park and down to Broxash Close, is 318. So if your argument is people are going to use the shortest route, well, they're not going to go along the A44 then. Why upgrade the footway? Why make somebody do that? Well, the officers argue no matter what you do, some people will walk along the A44, so it's better to make it as safe as possible. But it's also true that the more you improve it, the more you encourage other people to walk along it. And the crucial point here is that even if developed to the best that the topology allows, it will always be way below standards. There is not enough room to make it safe. So why are we looking at a proposal to encourage people to walk along an unsafe route? I would really encourage you to accept this application, but to remove this requirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. I now will move on to invite Mr. Smith, the applicant's agent, to speak in support of the application. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Russell Smith from McLaughlin Planning, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the applicant Vistry Homes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. The proposed development before you today is identified within the adopted core strategy. The proposals represent the culmination of extensive discussions with officers and the Town Council and will deliver much needed new housing, including affordable housing, extensive new public open space, land for the expansion of St Peter's Primary School, and financial contributions of circa 1.5 million towards local infrastructure improvements. You've received a comprehensive report and presentation from the case officer confirming that the proposed development is in accordance with the core strategy. The applicant has received an allocation of phosphate credits from the council, and proposed development is deemed nutrient neutral by Natural England. The application should therefore be approved without delay in accordance with national policy. The issue that I want to touch upon today is that of sustainable connectivity, and the comments received by the local highway authority, the LHA. The proposed sustainable transport strategy has been the focus of extensive discussions between the applicant, the LHA and the Town Council. Connections are proposed to Winslow Road via Cherry Tree Close, Damson Tree Close and Flagner's Close as shown in the officer's presentation. In accordance with MPPF paragraph 114, the proposed strategy ensures that safe and suitable access to the site can be achieved for all users, and appropriate opportunities to promote sustainable transport modes have been taken up given the type of development and, importantly, its location. It's important to have regard to the specific location factors of the site. The strategy put forward by the applicant seeks to discourage pedestrians and cyclists from accessing the A44 west of Winslow Road. This is due to concerns regarding the nature and environment of the existing local highway network at this point. These are concerns that have been raised by local residents, the Town Council, and also by members here today when considering an application, reference 190111, for development on a nearby site to the south of the A44. Members refused that application on the highways grounds by virtue of the insufficient width of the proposed footway, taken with the unsatisfactory nature of the environment. Despite this decision and the concerns of the Town Council, the LHA continues to insist upon works to Upper Hardwick Lane and the A44 footway, and this could encourage residents to access the A44 at this point where insufficient width to widen the footway to an appropriate standard. The applicant's proposed strategy, which has been subject to a road safety audit, proposes a safe and suitable route via Flagler's Close. This route is broadly commensurate in length, just 70 metres longer, and will be signed and lit and suitably surfaced. However, the recommendation before you today seeks an additional financial contribution over and above the sustainable transport contribution of £500,000 to carry out these works. The applicant will be guided by members on this matter, but respectfully request that members consider whether this contribution and the works that it would fund are necessary to make the development acceptable and consistent with their earlier decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Could you kindly take your seats back in the public gallery? Thank you. Councillor Claire Davies is the local member, and she has the right to introduce the debate and to speak at the end and final summing up of the debate. She has 10 minutes at the beginning. Thank you, Councillor Davies.
I'll start again. Firstly, I would like to thank our planning officer, Ollie Jones, for the amazing amount of work that has gone into your presentation. It was fantastic. Thank you. I'm not going to mention the extra that we received yesterday afternoon at this point. I'd also would like to thank the lovely Katie Jones, the team leader for the area as the area engineer. And it was lovely because we hadn't met you before on site. So thank you. I want to thank Roger Page, Vice Chair of Bromyard and Winslow Town Council, for coming along today, as well as Professor Mark Whitehorn, a concerned resident, and has spent many hours identifying the problems with the traffic and safety of pedestrians and cyclists on the A44. To Russell Smith on behalf of the applicant, who's flabbergasted at the amount of restrictions and conditions that were put forward. I'd also like to thank our planning committee, who came along yesterday, who enjoyed the lovely day that we had looking at the site, and the most of us had to step over a fence, which was quite interesting. So I want to thank you for that, but I do want to move on now. This application is very much needed in Bromyard, and residents have been looking forward to the positive changes it will bring to their lives and to the future development of the town. I will not add any comments about condition 36 because it has already been mentioned passionately. I can't understand, and I hope someone can enlighten me, as to why the developer has been asked to contribute to the A44 footpath from Upper Hardwick Bank to Winslow Road, which has not been mentioned before, and we, the committee, only found out about it if we turned our computers on yesterday afternoon after the site visit. If we needed to confirm with our town council because of this material change, we would not have had time to do so. I ask the question, What has the path got to do with this development when other provisions had been made for pedestrians and cyclists? Can I have, Clark, can I please have a slide? Just bear with me. I'm just going to use my pointer. So, Councillor Baker, if you could just move your head out the way so I don't actually put the counter anywhere near you. Yes. Okay. Right. Let's just find it. All right. So if we come down here, where's the pointer going? Can we see it?
We can't see that through
You
the
can't see it.
screen.
Okay.
You have to describe
All right.
it.
Well, we'll forgo that. So, looking at this map, you can see that we've got this nice S bend. So, from the A44, we go along Hardwick Bank, and we get to the nice S bend. And from that S bend, we have got walkways going on to safer areas. Now, my question is, why would anybody want to walk that 100 yards, possibly 100 yards, from that corner right onto that A44, where we've got these massive big lorries passing by? And yesterday, the wind was actually knocking us towards the fence. So I'll say again, I can't see how anybody would want to do that. But as you said earlier on, there'll always be somebody who will want to have a little go. We, the committee, unanimously decided last October to refuse the application 190111 Gladman to the south because the footpath access referred to you or by me as not being safe. And yesterday, as I've said, it was confirmed again. This footpath should be discouraged, not encouraged. I feel sure that this committee will stick to its previous decision regarding this footpath and remove this requirement imposed at para 735 under 106 contributions as an additional contribution on top of the £500,000 already accepted by the applicant for highways works as specified. Chair, it has been over 10 years since the Town Council pushed Hardwick Bank as a designated site for 500 dwellings, 80% of Bromyard's target on top of the 13% already built and a further 5% in the pipeline. It was in 2016 when the applicants commenced pre-planning discussion, and here we are, 8 years later, with nothing built. In the meantime, planning consent has gone down the drain for the old depot sites, Ashfield Ways, I could be corrected on that, because they could not be physically developed, and Hardwick Bank has been pushed aside in favour of Gladman's, which has been refused 4 times, including an appeal. I ask members to support this application with the removal of the additional contributions for the redundant A44 pathway to be consistent with previous decisions. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Can I now invite debate? Can I have any speakers? None? Then we'll...
Sorry. I just wondered, is it worth Katie just explaining her position now before we start the debate? Would that help?
Hello. With regards to the local highway authority's position on the A44 footway, we don't view it as encouraging its use. We view that particularly teenagers, perhaps going to the high school, would walk the shortest route, which is down Upper Hardwick Lane and onto the A44. Regardless, there is another route, but that intuitively wouldn't feel to be the shortest route to any teenager because it's heading north, it's going the wrong direction to where they're wanting to go. So we feel that there will be a proportion of pedestrians from the site who will walk straight down Upper Hardwick Lane onto the A44, regardless. And it's not a route that we would encourage, but we think that they will use the route anyway. So our view is to make it as safe as possible by setting back the footway on the A44 to the back of the verge, thereby creating a half-metre grass verge between the footway and the A44, where it is recognised it is a pinch point at that point for large vehicles, and it would help mitigate any overhanging wing mirrors from lorries, because you'd have this sort of half-metre buffer. And so it is the local highway authority's view that would enable safe passage for those who aren't going to walk the sort of designated route onto Flegler's Close, and stated in our response, we would object if it wasn't included. So yeah, I just sort of want to set out our views. Thank you.
But I think we have to identify the position we find ourselves in if we were minded to leave this particular condition in, bearing in mind we may be subject to an appeal on a rejection of a previous application based on principal objection to this particular site. Pedestrian development.
Can I?
Councillor.
We had a look at this yesterday, and what I ask is, have highways actually got your tape measure out? Because what you're proposing is not possible. There's just not enough ground there. So it's...
Actually, myself and our Section 278 manager have been out to site and measured on several occasions for the footway to confirm that it can be fitted in.
Right. Other members? Councillor Simons?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Ollie Jones, for taking us out on site yesterday. Your comprehensive report. It was very good to revisit the site again, particularly the section with the A44. I would very much like to support this proposal coming forward. I think there's been a lot of hard work done in terms of the layout and landscaping. I'll deal with the A44 section first of all. I do agree with the Highways Officer that desire line and research on there show that people will, from this development, likely to access the A44. I therefore understand the Highway Authority's view and the need for Section 106 on that. I am, however, wishing that people are directed towards the other routes which would take them away from the A44. I'd like to see if we can discuss transport plans as part of conditions linked to the development of the site and communication with the senior school with regards to that. I'm really pleased to see the greater permeability of this strategic site with the existing landform and development of Bromyard, particularly the addition of the cycle access via Cherry Tree in the school expansion area. I'm really pleased to see the connectivity with the existing public rights of way. I would like some improvements made to the footway connection into Flagoners, and whether anything can be done with the footway connection into Brocksash Close with the steps that come off up Hardwick Lane. I do appreciate what the Mr. Whitehorn said with regard to the distances, but I think he's taken that distance as across the car park, which, as we discussed yesterday, isn't a public right-of-way through that car park. It is just up the steps, which means it's not accessible to everybody. And I'm sure the Highways Authority is looking at access for all, including pushchairs, wheelchairs, and whatnot. I really would like to discourage people walking along that A44. I'm quite torn about the addition to Section 106 there. I would also like to discuss the layout. Although landscaping is a reserved matters issue, the layout informs the ability to do landscaping. I'm really pleased to see the area TPOs because I know how difficult it is to condition through pre-commencement retention of areas of hedgerow and other landform that tend to end up being passed to outline and then conditioned at reserved matters. I'm a bit concerned about the public right-of-way access behind I think it's Dams and Trees. We walked along there. There's a public right of way that has hedging all along the development side. Looking at the layout, it really looks like the development would be up against that public right of way and potentially require the removal of that hedgerow. I would like to make sure that we have that connectivity as per our core strategy with existing landform and hedgerows there being retained wherever possible. Yeah, thank you. That's my comments. I'd like to come back on anything if it's raised.
Councillor Baker, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have any concerns regarding the size and proposed layout of the site. It's been a long time coming. I understand the original plans were made in 2016, 8 years ago. But first of all, can I commend Ollie Jones on his detailed planning report and the comprehensive guided tour we had of the site yesterday. We had 4 hours of site visits in the cold yesterday. I think most of us have actually thawed out now. It was a killer. But anyway, it was worthwhile, the site, all of them, but this one was worthwhile, certainly. My concerns, much like everybody else, is the safety of children, especially those older children who will be attending Queen Elizabeth High School in Panniers Lane. I think the problem is we won't really know what the problems are with where the children are going. Are they going down Upper Hardwick Lane along the A44 or using the preferred footpath through the existing site? We won't really know what they're going to be doing until the site is built and all the children have moved in and start going to school. So it's one of those difficult quandaries. We've talked, well, people have talked this morning about this 106 agreement to widen the footpath along the A44. If the developers want that, then they should pay for it, surely. Not a 106 money, but that's just my opinion. We haven't discussed that. It certainly wasn't discussed yesterday. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. It's a matter for officers and the developers, I assume, as to how that's dealt with. Highways are quite clear that they want to widen the footpath there. There is a bit of grass verge that could be used between Upper Hardwick Lane and Winslow Close. That's basically encouraging people to use that section of road, which is inherently dangerous, one of the reasons why Claire Davis has said we refused the Flaggoners Walk application a few months ago because of the danger to children on the 44. But I think it will find its own level eventually, but we won't really know how particularly dangerous it is until it's been built. But anyway, that's just my views. Thank you very much. I'm not going to make a recommendation for approval at this stage. I'll keep my powder dry until my colleagues have finished talking.
Sorry, did you want something?
Yes, sorry, can I just add in relation to what my colleague has said, in relation to that section between Hardwick Lane along the A44 and the frontages there, I mean, when we discussed this in the previous application relating to the opposite side of the road, it was particularly, we were really concerned as well about cycle, the fact that can't be wide enough for a combined footway and cycle, and that there was no other access, safe access to the schools or wider permeability. So I think it goes beyond just the A44. I think this development has that cycle access and better permeability elsewhere on the site, but I do understand the need for highways improvements in that section on the A44. So I wouldn't like to see the section 106 removed if it's, if we find that, as you say, once the development has been developed and we need to do something because people are using it. But it would never enable a cycleway along there, which, yeah, thanks.
Councillor Jenner.
Thank you. I think previously we were discussing pedestrian access from further to the west on the A44. I think with the section that so the section we're looking at already has a footway. It's between Upper Hardwick Lane and Winslow Road. So I think from my point of view, there's not as much a risk as the extended A44 that we were looking at last time, if that makes sense.
Any other speakers? Councillor Hamlin.
Following on a little from Councillor Jennard's comments a second ago, yes, I think perhaps for pedestrians it might be just not quite so dangerous as the previous proposed one that was turned down. But what can we do to prevent the possibility of children who do like to ride their bicycles on the footpaths, and if they're doing so cheekily and have to drop off the pavement onto the road to get round pedestrians, for instance, they're going to really endanger themselves. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, listening to everybody, I think when we were there 2 months, 3 months ago, and we rejected the Gladman, one of my colleagues said, "I don't want the blood of one child on my conscience." I'm not going to say who it was. And I felt exactly the same thing. And we all stood there and we all almost instantly, look, this cannot be allowed. But we're now rehashing more or less the same thing coming across at A44. Whatever we do, we should discourage anybody from walking on the edge of the A44. Even if you take the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit 100 metres down the road or however far, you will not slow lorries down. A 37-ton Arctic, gentleman over there will probably travelling at 30 miles an hour, which he will be doing at that point, takes a heck of a lot of stopping. And if a child steps out in the road, there is no earthly way that you can prevent a serious accident. You have an accident, you do not survive it. And I think this constantly re-encouraging and walkway on the A44, we should discourage it completely. Because at the end of the day, we are going to have children killed there. And it's as serious as that. I've never stood on a more dangerous section of road anywhere in Herefordshire, and I live virtually on the A49.
Sorry, Ms Gibbons.
If that's okay. Sort of just to interject there, I suppose, on a couple of things. One, obviously, you've heard that there is an existing footway there. People may walk on it anyway, and that situation that you've described, may occur whether the footway is wider or not wider. But I think the other thing to mention as well is when we're dealing with it, if we've requested the Section 106 money after careful consideration, we understand those local views and we understand the views of the town council, and also the views of the applicant. They've made the same views. The local highway authority, as you said, this has been going on a long time. They haven't come to that conclusion lightly. It is a very considered response. As we do with those Section 106 contributions, we'll request that contribution. We've put it in as a separate contribution. We haven't put it in as part of the longer list of the wider contributions. It's an additional contribution. If at the point that we go to deliver or spend that, there is a consultation period, a consultation process that we will go through with the ward councillors, with the town council, and we can talk about that delivery mechanism at that point. Officers are of the opinion it's necessary to make the development acceptable at this point. And I appreciate there are views that may say that they don't feel it's necessary to make the development acceptable. However, that's a view that you need to come to in that decision. The other thing I would say, just referring back to the travel plans and the directing people in the other direction, part of those proposals will include signage, and they will include travel plans for those for the rollout of those sale of those properties, and we'll engage in that way. So those things are already in place, and we agree we should be directing people in the other direction. But it's about addressing the potential for people to walk in that desire line, and that, as I said, it's a very careful and considered approach, being mindful of the previous decision ourselves, but it's still an approach that we have taken and that the local highway authority have put forward. So I'd like you to take that into account as well.
Can I say, you know, this is a dilemma, because whatever we do, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. If we don't do this footpath scheme and some child is injured or killed, we'll be blamed. And if we do and some child is injured or killed, we'll be blamed. Whichever way we do it. So it's a matter of whether we think, on balance, that it might be safer for this to be done or not. And that's a very difficult thing to do. Anyway, members. Further, Councillor Baker.
In the absence of any further debate, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that this application be approved.
According to the recommendations as outlined in the paper. Is that seconded? That is seconded.
Yes, Chair, I'd second that.
All right, thank you. Are there any other speakers, please? Sorry, did you want to? Yeah, at the end, but I mean, I don't know, unless you wanted to put right something that's actually been said.
Yes, please. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that it was the developer was asked for extra money to the £500,000 that they've already said that they're willing to contribute. I think, you know, if this has to be done, then why should the developer have to be the one to actually pay for it?
I think, you know, the scale of this development, £500,000 is relatively minor. Anyway. Councillor Bolter.
Yeah, just one question, Chair. Do we have any data on accidents on that road for the last 10 years that have formulated any opinions regarding the transport side?
Mr. Jones.
I'm not aware of any issues, but I'll just double check for you now.
Thank you.
Right, are there any other speakers? I'll come back with that. Sorry, did you want to?
Just in relation to Councillor Davis's comments just there, I would much rather developer pays for this than taxpayers from the area. Thanks.
Just on that.
We're waiting.
Yeah, just probably sort of a learning point and just a point of clarity, that if in the event that money isn't spent, then the Section 106 does require us to return that money. So it's that sort of position is there that if when we go to do, you know, if the result is that for whatever reason that work isn't undertaken, then there is that position whereby the money is required to be returned to the developer. But as I said, you know, and it is an additional payment, as you said, because we feel it is necessary to make the development acceptable, and therefore that payment should be required as Section 106 in lieu of the 278 works that, within the highway that we would have requested initially.
Right. Are there any?
Sorry, just coming back on the accidents. There's been a serious accident at the junction with Panniers Lane on the A44, and further east on the A44. But there's been no accidents between Winslow Road and Upper Hardwick Lane. In the last 10 years. Yeah, it's reported accidents.
In mind, we're going to add 250 houses to that. But anyway, Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. I would simply comment that it is this actual development that is causing the necessity to improve that stretch of pavement.
Are there any other speakers? We have a proposer and seconder for the recommendations outlined in the agenda papers. Yes, I'm coming to that. I've got the officers. Any further comments from officers?
No, nothing from us, thank you.
Then I'll come to Councillor Davis to final comments.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for your in-depth comments. I too will accept this application. Admittedly, I'm a little bit sad about the one area I've already mentioned, but we do need this in Bromyard. So I fully support the recommendation that has been made.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. We have a recommendation proposed and seconded. Can I ask for those in favour of that recommendation? Please show. Those against? Abstentions? One abstention. Then that is carried. Can I now call for a 10-minute break? If we can get back by then for a comfort break. Thank you all. If you can... Microphone. One, two.
Is it just because of...
Yeah. Yes? No? No mic. Oh, yeah, we're back.
There we are. Bounce back.
Right, welcome back. Can I now ask that the meeting starts? Can I ask that the live stream is?
Live stream's back on, Chair.
Right. And we'll now move on to the second application. Can I request that the public speakers present in person for the agenda item 7 join the meeting? Mr. Lees, Ms. Stewart, and Mr. White to take their seats in the public participation tables. Good morning, and can I welcome you to the meeting? And I will call you to speak following the officer's presentation. Get to the right page. Can I ask Ms. Genman to give her presentation, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I thank all members who attended the site visit yesterday, which I hope was helpful in terms of site context. This application in front of members today has been redirected to Planning Committee by Councillor Hamlin due to the level of local interest. Firstly, I would like to bring your attention to the update sheet, whereby a further representation by a member of the public is reported, and updates to queries raised yesterday relating to site levels, seasonal worker accommodation and local water systems have been clarified. I will discuss these points in more detail as I go through the presentation. Members will see that the only change to the recommendation is that of condition 7, which has been amended to capture and consider the ground levels. Moving on to the presentation. So the application site is identified in the usual manner by the red star. This is a full planning application which seeks permission for 9.5 hectares of fixed polytunnels for the growing of strawberries. The application also seeks permission for the relocation and upgrade of an existing field access, a steel-framed general-purpose agricultural building and 6 water tanks, all of which are ancillary to that of the proposed polytunnels. The application site is known as Drakeley Farm and is currently accessed via a track taken from the C1124, which members used yesterday. There is a pair of semi-detached dwellings and a range of small outbuildings which members would have seen yesterday. However, these do not form part of this application. The proposed development under consideration represents an extension to the existing soft fruit enterprise of S&A Produce, with the proposed development to be incorporated and farmed alongside that of the existing soft fruit enterprise. The application in front of members this morning is recommended for approval with suitably worded conditions as detailed at the end of the report. Next slide, please. So this slide helps with the site context. The application site is located in the parish of Marden, around 4.5 kilometres to the north of Hereford. The village of Marden is located in a central location within the parish and is the main settlement supporting a range of services. There are no main A roads within the parish, with the closest being that of the A49, Hereford to Leominster Road, which is shown in green on the western edge of the top map. Haywood Lane connects the A49 to the village of Marden and crosses the railway line and the River Lug, which meanders and winds its way down from the village of Bodnam in the north towards the village of Morton and Lug to the south. The village of Marden hosts a range of services including a village shop and school. As members would have seen yesterday, there is an extensive network of public footpaths and bridle paths which crisscross around the site and through the village. Brook Farm, which is the headquarters of S&A, is identified to the north of the village, with the application site at Drakeley located to the west of the existing polytunnel. As viewed and identified on site yesterday, there is a recently constructed winterfill reservoir which adjoins the site to the east and identified on the aerial image at the bottom of the slide. The earthworks which are currently taking place and which were viewed yesterday by members are in connection with a further reservoir to the east of the application site and does not form part of this submission. There are a number of residential properties located in close proximity to the site. Of particular note are those close to the proposed upgraded access and those along the existing bridle path and to the east of the site at Ben's Green. Next slide, please. This slide shows the extent of the applicant's land ownership and existing business. The application site is outlined in red, with all other land owned by the applicant in blue. Yesterday on site, it was identified that there is a field between that of the existing development and the application site, which is not within the applicant's ownership. Within this field, however, there is a public footpath which provides a direct pedestrian access, which will be utilised by workers to access the application site from that of the existing site. As identified within the beginning of the report, the application represents an extension to the applicant's existing soft fruit enterprise, S&A. S&A are one of the largest independent soft fruit growers in Europe, growing a variety of soft fruit and vegetables. Their headquarters are at Brook Farm in Marden, which is located just north of the village and consists of a packing and processing plant, seasonal worker accommodation, research and development laboratories and offices. The aerial image at the bottom of the slide shows the existing coverage and location of the polytunnels, which cover some 37 hectares of land around Brook Farm. The settlement of Marden is also evident to the south of the existing development and which members would have seen yesterday. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the proposed layout of the development. The proposed polytunnels are split into 4 cropping areas, which are identified and described at paragraph 1.14 of the report. The tunnels are to be arranged at various lengths to fit the fields which they are located upon. A headland around the perimeter of the site is to facilitate access and circulation around the site. Access tracks constructed of stone at a width of 3 metres are proposed, with further areas of wildflowers along its length. All boundary hedges and trees and tree areas are to be retained, with appropriate root protection areas provided. As is normal practice with polytunnel developments, the tunnels will follow the contours of the land. However, due to the current earthworks which are occurring on site and in connection with the approved water reservoir, and that of which have occurred as a result of the completed water reservoir, it is recommended as part of condition 7 that prior to any works commencing on site, cross-sections through each of the fields are provided for approval, which show the finished ground levels for us to approve. This will ensure that the character of the area is safeguarded, and it will consider the need for any additional landscaping and planting. At the centre of the site, on the lower ground, there is to be a central yard where the proposed storage building and water tanks are to be located. A new access track which connects the yard to the proposed upgraded access to the south of the site onto the C1124 will run along the western boundary of the site. The proposed tunnels have been positioned and laid out so that they are set back from adjoining highways and are appropriate distances from adjoining residential properties. However, the further details which will be secured through condition 7 will ensure that there is sufficient distances from the hedgerows and public rights of way. With regards to the principle of the development, Strategic Policy SS6 in the CS and in the core strategy states that, in broad terms, the continuing development of the more traditional employment sectors such as farming and food and drink manufacturers will be supported. The National Planning Policy Framework seeks to promote strong rural economies through sustainable growth and expansion of businesses in rural areas and the diversification of agricultural and other land use businesses. The principle of the polytunnels and associated development in this rural location is detailed within paragraph 6.15 to 6.24 of my officer report. The proposed polytunnels are to be installed in association with the existing tunnels and operations to the west of the site, with all fruit grown to be processed and transferred via the existing infrastructure at Brook Farm. As highlighted on site, the proposal represents an extension to the existing business and will utilise all existing infrastructure, including the seasonal workers. Whilst we were on site yesterday, Councillor Simmons asked for clarification on the number of additional seasonal workers required. The applicants clarified this in a submission in October, addressing points raised by the Parish Council. The additional overall requirement is that of 30. The company currently employs 395 seasonal workers. However, there is permission for the accommodation of up to 850 workers. If approved, the total number of seasonal workers required will be that of 425. The business therefore has more than sufficient accommodation. There is clear support both in local and national planning policy for the principle of the development in this rural area and has benefits for the UK food production and for sustainable food distribution. However, the principle of the development and the economic and social benefits needs to be balanced against the topic-based material planning considerations, which I'll now move on to. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the elevation and details of the proposed polytunnels. The picture on the bottom is taken from within the existing site. Each tunnel is to have an 8-metre width and a maximum height of 4.5 metres. They are to be constructed using a steel framework and are to follow the contours of the ground. The image shows that each tunnel will accommodate 6 parallel rows of tables at a height of 1 metre for the soft fruits to be grown. The covered are clear polythene sheets secured over the framework. The covering has a lifespan of 3 years, at the end of which it is removed, baled and sent to a recycling plant. Next slide, please. This slide shows the detailed drawings of the proposed storage building and water tanks to be located within the proposed yard. Members will note that condition 13 on the recommendation controls the use of the building to that of the storage of machinery and equipment associated with the growing of soft fruits on the site. The proposed storage building is to be 36 metres long and 18 metres wide, and the building is to be coloured slate blue. I've included on this slide a picture of the tractor and trailer which members would have seen yesterday. These tractors and trailers will be used to transport the fruit, and the size of the building has been designed so so the tractors and trailers can be stored in the building overnight. In terms of the water tanks, these are to be used as primary water storage tanks. Water is to be pumped from the reservoir and stored here as a localised water supply. This water will then be used to irrigate the crops which are grown in Drakeley when required. As seen on other polytunnel sites within the county, it is necessary to have localised water storage for security in case there are issues with the water supply, as the crops grown are extremely sensitive to any break in irrigation. Next slide, please. This slide identifies the proposed relocated access. If approved, all vehicle access into the site in connection with the growing of soft fruit will be from the proposed new access at the northern edge of Marden Road. The access has been designed to accommodate the required manoeuvres and visibility displays of 56 metres in each direction. This is as a result from the speed surveys undertaken. The existing access adjacent to the residential property 3 Hawkshead Cottage is to be closed, with the landscaping and planting provided adjacent to the boundary with the new access track and residential property. It is recognised that traffic generation arising from the proposed development represents a key issue for many of the local residents and that of the parish council. As already mentioned, once the fruit has been picked, it will be transported back to Brook Farm to be processed. The route to be taken is that from the new access through the centre of the village and the residential Walker's Green, back to Brook Farm. No HGVs will access the Drakeley site. The fruit will be transported via the tractors and trailers, which again, a photo is included at the top. The application has been supported with a transport statement which identifies the proposal will result in 12 two-way movements per day from the site back to Brook Farm. This is 6 arrivals and 6 departures. All seasonal workers are to travel to and from the site via the network of public footpaths. The development will result in an increase of 1 to 2 additional HG movements from Brook Farm a week during the growing season. As part of the recommendation, conditions are included for a site management plan, which will include details of the management of all traffic transporting fruit from and around the site. The site management plan will also include a noise management plan to ensure that all operations on the site do not generate noise which will impact upon the residential amenity of nearby residents or users of the public right-of-way. The Council's highways officers have no objection to the proposal and are satisfied that the proposed upgrade access provides a safe entrance and exit to the site for the traffic to be generated from the proposal. Next slide, please. This slide identifies the route from the site back to Brook Farm, as well as the route from Brook Farm to the A49. Officers have considered the context of the route and the development and services along it. The applicants have offered to restrict vehicle movements to and from the site during school start and finish times, and this will be captured through the site management plan. It is recognised that the development will result in a change in the nature of vehicle movements to that of the arable use in recent years. However, from the information submitted and controls around the transportation of fruit, the traffic generation is not considered to impact significantly on the local highway network and can be accommodated safely. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some photos taken along the route back to Brook Farm through the village. The majority of the route back to Brook Farm has a 30-mile speed limit and has pavements for pedestrians. Next slide, please. This next slide identifies the network of public right-of-way and bridle paths which surround the development. The network of paths are valued and enjoyed by many local residents, and the impact of the development upon the visual amenity and landscape character when viewed from the footpaths by users has been considered. Officers have also considered the cumulative impact with that of the existing development. It was identified on site yesterday that bridle path MR22 travels through the proposed development, with bridle path MR19 running along the whole length of the western boundary of the site, and on which members walked yesterday. All paths are to remain unobstructed and will be accessible. It was identified on site yesterday when members walked along the bridle path within the site that a new hedgerow was to be installed to provide a visual separation between the tunnels and that of the bridle path, whilst also providing screening of the proposed tunnels from the Marden Road. The scale of visual effects along the stretch of the bridle path which members walked yesterday are considered to be high. Although an open corridor with adequate spacing, the development will change the character on this stretch of the path. Officers acknowledge that there will be some visual harm, to varying degrees, both in isolation and cumulatively with the existing tunnels. However, the harm is not considered to be substantial, and the proposed planting and landscaping mitigation will help in screening the tunnels and filtering views, whilst also enhancing the existing green infrastructure around the boundaries. Next slide, please. This next slide shows photos taken along the public right-of-way and bridle path, both within the site and within the existing polytunnel developments. The photo on the top left is where members stood yesterday and were able to view the wider landscape. As identified yesterday, the field is not within the ownership of the applicant. However, there was a well-used public footpath which provides a connection from the existing site to that of the proposed. The photo at the top right identifies the footpath within the existing site. As the site is a working site, the applicants mark out the route of the footpath, and in some areas have planted vegetation either side, which is shown in the photo on the bottom right. The photo in the bottom left of the slide shows the route of the bridle path which members walked yesterday. As identified, part of the landscape mitigation is to plant that native hedgerow along the majority of the length of this stretch of the bridle path, which will not only help with the visual amenity from the bridle path, but also help from the views from the highway. Members were also able to see yesterday the uncovered blueberry plantations, which are grown in pots on land to the south of the site. These plantations don't require planning permission and serve as additional landscape mitigation against the proposed polytunnel areas. It is considered that the majority of potential visual effects are to be experienced by users of the public rights of way within the area, as well as within the wider landscape. The legal routes of all paths, however, will remain intact. Officers recognise that the landscape is a working agricultural landscape. The views from the public right of way of the development will be largely filtered and contained within the extensive landscape fabric. The landscape officer and public rights of way officer have raised no objection to the proposal with regards to the potential effects on the public rights of way. Next slide, please. This next slide identifies the heritage assets which were assessed as part of the heritage statement which accompanied the application. It was identified to members on site yesterday that there is a cluster of Grade 2 listed residential dwellings and buildings to the southeast corner of the site, where members access the site, and along Marden Road as well as to the east. The impact on heritage is discussed in detail within the report. The application was supported by a heritage impact assessment which considers the setting of each asset and how the proposed development will impact upon it. The assessment concludes that the aspects of the settings which contribute to the significance of each of the listed buildings would not be harmed. The Council's Heritage Officer, having previously objected to the larger proposal on site, is now satisfied that the proposed scale and layout of the development proposed will now result in a neutral impact upon the setting of all heritage assets identified. Next slide, please. These next few slides considered the wider landscape impact and identified landscaping scheme around the site. By their very nature, the effects of a polytunnel scheme on the character and appearance of the landscape is a key consideration and has been raised as a concern within the majority of representations received. The Council's Landscape Officer has been actively involved in the application process. The site is not within a designated landscape. The application was supported by a landscape and visual impact appraisal, which has assessed the direct effects of the proposal on the landscape resources and indirect effects on the public perception of landscape arising from the change and visual impact. This appraisal assessed 20 viewpoints, which are shown on this slide. On site yesterday, it was identified to members the proposed long-distance view from the Queenswood Country Park, which is located over 2.6 kilometres from the site to the northwest. This was assessed as part of the appraisal, and the photograph on the bottom of the slide was taken from the viewpoint. It identifies where the development will be seen. Due to its elevated position, the viewpoint is afforded wide views across the landscape towards Hereford along the A49. There are several villages and large developments which can be seen within the rural landscape on a clear day. The existing tunnels can be seen from this viewpoint, and it is recognised that parts of the proposed site will be seen from the viewpoint, especially during winter months. Overall, the appraisal identifies that there is a potential for a moderate adverse effect upon this viewpoint. The separation with the existing development and a varied topography across the site will result in not all of the site being seen. However, officers acknowledge the development will be viewed from this viewpoint. Other viewpoints assessed were positioned on public rights of way and local highways. The appraisal identifies that the majority of potential visual effects will be experienced by the users of the public right of way, which are in close proximity to the site. Officers, overall, the conclusions of the appraisal is that the scheme would create a localised, moderate adverse effect on the overall character of the site. However, the proposed mitigation will assist in ensuring that the visual and physical impact on the landscape is not to be overbearing and takes into consideration the existing landscape, historic context and public viewpoints. Officers would agree with the overall assessment, especially when considered cumulatively with that of the existing development. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the landscape master plan and mitigation on the northern part of the site. The landscape master plan has evolved over time with inputs from both the council's ecology and landscape officers during pre-application discussions and during this application process. Areas of native buffering and hedgerow planting are proposed along boundaries to filter views of the development from the public rights of way and residential dwellings. Existing and proposed hedgerows are to be actively managed to maximise thickness and maximise visual screening. Officers do recognise that there are areas where the proposed landscaping can go further. Members identified areas along the access track yesterday where mature trees and hedgerows need to be protected, but also areas where further enhancement could also be provided, not only from a landscape perspective, but also from that of a biodiversity one. As already highlighted, Condition 7 on the recommendation includes a requirement for a scaled plan for all trees and hedgerows to be retained, with their protection to be identified, along with further details on species of plants. These plans will also identify the distance between the hedgerow boundaries and that of the tunnels to ensure that there is adequate separation, not only from a visual perspective, but also to assist in biodiversity connectivity. The landscape officer, although acknowledging that there will be some harm to the overall landscape character, through the proposed mitigation and a detailed planting scheme and landscape maintenance and management plan, recognises that this will be reduced and the views will be filtered into and across the site. Having objected to the previous proposal, the landscape officer has now offered support for this application, subject to appropriate conditions. Next slide, please. So on these next set of plans, they show the proposed landscaping on the southern part of the site and include the proposed relocated access onto Marden Road and the areas around the bridle path which travels through the site. Next slide, please. This further slide just shows photos from around the site, including the blueberry planting, which members would have seen yesterday. Next slide, please. So moving on to the drainage strategy around the site. This plan and drawing and photographs show the existing reservoir which has been constructed on the site. The impact of the proposal upon surface water runoff rates and the implications for localised flooding is a material planning consideration. The application has been supported by a flood risk assessment and a surface water management plan. It is recognised that the availability of water is fundamental to the success of soft fruit businesses. The strategy put forward is similar to that across many of the polytunnel sites in Herefordshire. Rainfall is to be captured and recycled for irrigation during the growing season, preventing the need for the applicant to abstract from any local watercourse. As members were able to see yesterday, the site is already served by a number of ponds and the recently constructed reservoir. Surface water runoff from the proposed tunnels will be intercepted and directed to French drains located down gradient of the polytunnels, which will discharge directly into the reservoir for irrigation. The council's drainage engineers have been involved in the development and design of the drainage strategy throughout the pre-application discussions and during the course of this application. The drainage engineers have advised officers that the submitted information has demonstrated that the scheme is capable of delivering a sustainable water management system which will protect and enhance groundwater resources and which does not pose a risk to localised flooding. When we were on site yesterday, there was a question raised regarding the protection of existing ponds and watercourses. The application site is within the River Lug catchment, and as such, there is a requirement for habitat regulations assessment to be completed to consider the potential effects on the proposal upon the River Lug SAC. The application was supported with a shadow HRA, which following considerations of all supporting documents, the planning ecologist was satisfied to formally adopt as the majority part of the required habitats regulation appropriate assessment. Commentary is provided at paragraph 4.6 by the Council's planning ecologist. The Council's completed HRA identified a net reduction in agricultural pathway for nutrients into the Lug-Sack catchment by reducing rainfall and water movements through existing topsoil and reducing the pathway for the legacy phosphate to enter the hydraulic catchment. Clean surface water created by the proposed tunnels is to be utilised to provide required crop irrigation, with any excess being diverted to the local pond system to maintain their biodiversity potential. All irrigation water is managed on a demand and supply basis, and any outfall from the tabletop system is directly recycled, so any nutrients remain within the closed system. I would highlight condition 9 to members on the recommendation, which will control and maintain the water management scheme throughout the lifetime of the developments. Natural England were consulted on the completed HRA and have confirmed they concur with the planning ecologist's findings. Next slide, please. So, to sum up, the application seeks full planning permission for the construction of 9.5 hectares of polytunnels and associated infrastructure across the site. The proposal represents an extension to the established soft fruit enterprise and supports the growth and expansion of the existing business, providing further employment within the agricultural and other related sectors, whilst adding value to the local food chain. The National Planning Policy Framework gives strong support to sustainable growth to support a prosperous rural economy. The success of the soft fruit growing industry in Herefordshire in recent years can largely be attributed to the use of polytunnels, which has enabled farmers to increase productivity and adapt to climate change. As identified within the report and discussed in the presentation, there is harm to the landscape. However, in this case, in the case of the proposal put forward, the scheme is considered capable of mitigation to such an extent that an objection on landscape grounds is considered to be unsustainable. The proposed tunnels have been positioned and laid out to ensure that they are not readily seen from any adjoining highway and are considered to be appropriately distanced from any adjoining residential properties. As highlighted and evident within the report, there are no technical objections to the proposal and the principle for the development is supported. Your officers have assessed the proposal against the development plan, and although moderate harm to the visual amenity of the area has been identified, these are outweighed by the social, economic and environmental benefits which have been identified. In conclusion, and on balance, the scheme is considered to accord with the relevant policies and found to represent sustainable development. There is no material considerations that are considered to outweigh the presumption in favour of sustainable development, and officers are mindful of the benefits of the proposal. As such, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. This concludes my committee presentation.
Thank you for a very extensive presentation. Thank you. Right, we'll move on now to public speakers. Can I invite Mr. Lees to speak on behalf of Marden Parish Council?
Good morning, Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. Rod Lees, Marden Parish Council. We object to the application on the following grounds. Transport. The road system is not designed to support the current volume of vehicles, let alone additional traffic. This is evidenced by the damage to the road edges and hedgerows. The exit from the field into C1124 is potentially unsafe. The data used to design this junction is not robust. It was based on a 3-hour survey between 9:35 and 12:35 on a Thursday when traffic levels are low. Best practice is it should be over a 7-day period. The average speed used is crucial to the visibility displays. The information on the route taken through by the additional traffic through the village is factually incorrect, 4.7 in officer's report. It states that the route is mainly through a rural residential area on the outskirts of the village. It goes through the middle of the village, past the exit for the 90-house development and the post office and shop, resulting in flawed conclusions being drawn on its safety and impact. We don't accept the conclusions on HGVs and other visitors, mostly going west to the A49. This route is regularly closed due to flooding and bridge damage. Observations show a significant number of vehicles go east and north. Flooding and surface water drainage. We dispute the conclusions drawn and the robustness of the data. The basis of the argument is that the French drains, coupled with the attenuation pools and reservoirs, collect all the water. Under item 4.8 of the officer's report, it becomes clear that this is not necessarily the case. Since the permanent polytunnels were installed, flooding has got worse, and we believe the tunnels have contributed to this. Additional tunnels will only make this worse. Prow. The impact on Prow is huge. Currently 20% of our bridleways are adjacent to tunnels. If this development is approved, it will be over 60%. This is in total contravention to the Council's Rights of Way Improvement Plan and will spoil the enjoyment of parishioners and visitors. The mitigation plans are ineffective and the tunnels will spook horses, creating a dangerous situation. New roadways running alongside the bridleways will only exasperate this. Noise and nuisance. The Information Environmental Health have based their recommendations on 4.11 is inaccurate. They state there have been no noise and nuisance complaints. We know that a number of complaints have been raised about noise, impact of mud on the roads, causing drainage problems and potentially dangerous incidents with vehicles. Development of Marden. Marden is key to the plans of Herefordshire Council for delivering their long-term housing commitment. This has had no consideration or comment when recommending this application goes ahead. We would like you to consider that whilst 22 people objected to this planning application...
I'm afraid you've used your 3 minutes. Thank you. Can I now ask Ms. Stewart, a resident, to speak in objection to the application? You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Claire Stewart, a local resident speaking for local objectors. We contend that this is industrial agriculture to grow a luxury crop. There are 27 supporters for these, only 3 of whom live in Marden. The rest are outside, as far as Manchester and East Kent. There were 25 objections. There were over 100, all the objections were in Marden. There were over 100 objections to the previous, but that was withdrawn and not given because we understood it was all the same application. So to consider what will be lost, if this development is permitted, I don't think you saw all the area yesterday. There's about 20 acres of gentle arable fields bordered by huge oaks and traditional Herefordshire hedges, hawthorn, blackthorn, crisscrossed by ancient lanes left to revert to nature when they were not adopted and made up by the local council. The views reach Hay Bluff. All is quiet. Field fares, redwings, footprints of deer, and man-trapped burrows of fox, badger, and rabbit. It's an utterly enchanting, peaceful, and restorative haven for man and beast, horse riders and walkers, fitting Herefordshire's core strategy desire to safeguard our natural heritage so as to encourage tourism. Yet this will cease to exist when the fields butting up to those lanes are filled with noisy plastic tunnels, machinery and workers going back and forth. And not just these immediate acres, because of the height of the landscape, any noise or visual dissonance is carried for miles. Having experienced the current polytunnels, there is always noise. They vibrate in the wind and the rain. Machinery has been experienced any time from 5:30 in the morning to all weekend. The British Horse Society wrote objecting to the previous application, which is essentially the same, saying that there had been an agreement that the Three Rivers ride should be protected. However, this development would impact it. CPRE, Campaign for the Protection of Rural England, also sent a very detailed and referenced objection to quote, "The proposed development will be a significant cumulative negative impact on the rural landscape and overwhelm the village. Such large-scale developments will have a profound effect on the intrinsic qualities of the Herefordshire countryside. It is these qualities which form the basis of tourism within the county. The sacrifice of agricultural land to such industrial farming methods will inevitably make the county less attractive as a tourist destination. People don't want to come here to see acres of plastic." Herefordshire Core Strategy also talks about sustainable development. development. CPRE quotes, "The entire site comprises Grade 2 and therefore best and most versatile agricultural land, according to DEFRA. The proposed development would therefore take over 9 hectares of valuable BMV land indefinitely, threatening long-term sterility from sprays, etc., at a time when food security is of particular concern. Year-round soft fruits are luxury crops, and this large area of land would be useful in growing necessary food such as staples."
Afraid you'll gone to 3 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. And now I ask Mr. White to speak on behalf of the applicant.
Morning. My name is Jim White, representing S&A Produce as Operations Director. I was born and educated in Hereford and have been in the soft fruit industry for 20 years. S&A is a fourth-generation family-owned Hereford business. Growing fruit since the 1990s, and since 2016 the business has changed considerably, now run by industry experts who are focused on leading the business based on high ethical and farming standards. S&A farms a total of 355 hectares in the UK, of which 127 hectares are in strawberry production, representing 35% of our land mass. Our Marden farm is 35 hectares, and the Drakeley application is an extension to our current site and will be controlled and operated as one. The rest of the land in our control is either in arable production, environmental areas or water storage infrastructure. A key focus of the proposed site will be to support our R&D facilities. In 2012, S&A started a breeding programme, which is now Europe's largest independent breeding programme. In 2024, it will supply 15 million plants to 95 European growers. This should be recognised as a major success for British horticulture, and at one level we should be proud that the groundbreaking innovation has been delivered by a Herefordshire farming business. Further opportunities to promote and champion British genetics can only be delivered if we are able to present a world-class farming environment, which we have built our vision into the Drakeley planning application. We achieve industry-leading yields through a dedicated management team, focused, engaged and market-facing, allowing us to be financially stable while shaping the modern fruit production sector of British agriculture. We now employ 150 full-time staff, of which 120 are based in Hereford. Data from 2022 demonstrated that we offer premium jobs to the Herefordshire rural economy at a 48% premium to the Herefordshire average. Our guest workers live on our sites, and we estimate that 60 to 70% of their earnings are reinvested back into the local services and economies. The primary use of polytunnels is to protect the fruit we grow and safeguard crops for our customers. Our financial investment in sites is large but essential for the key efficient operation. The ability for us to build permanent roadways, modern growing structures, water storage reservoirs and rainwater harvesting systems is all key to a modern production site. S&A is privately financed, investing £5 million if Herefordshire with this application. Our farm and genetics are supporting the UK Herefordshire farming industry, and it will see growers travel from around the world to come and experience and share knowledge with our business. I and my colleagues are proud to work in the UK soft fruit industry, and we're proud to work in S&A. The business allows me and others like me to make a fantastic living in a progressive sector where we're all passionate about what we do. The opportunity of our business offers young industry entrants in a huge, enabling them to build successful careers in our county. UK farming relies on controlled and considered expansion to remain competitive and resilient against inflationary pressure. This application has been resubmitted, having considered and addressed previous concerns raised, together with the neighbours in close proximity to the application.
I'm afraid you've gone to your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. White. Right, we'll now move to the local member, Councillor Hamblin, who will speak. He has no vote in this particular matter as being the local member. Mr. Hamblin, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again to everybody, and thank you for all those who turned up yesterday at the site visit. It was extremely useful. I think many of the people who had not seen a farm similar to this before were quite surprised by what they found when they arrived. Of course, having not been able to see it previously, as indeed from the local roadway systems, the local highways, you cannot see it. Thanks also to the officers, particularly Rebecca Genman, for her extraordinary amount of work on this one. She, as indeed have I, spent a lot of time on site, and consequently have been able to bring this application into form suitable to be brought to the committee. The applicant, S&A Group, or S&A Produce, we've just heard, fruit growers and breeders. They will be known to many of you. They really are a major player in the European soft fruit business, as well as actually, I think, in South America and other much more distant parts of the world. At the headquarters in Marden, they have several hectares of nursery polytunnels where they nurture new and potential varieties of the fruits, and they also have a multi-million-pound scientific unit with laboratories capable of mapping and understanding the DNA profile of each of these fruits. It's a very advanced business. However, some of the developments required to conduct this enterprise have not always met with approval, and for this reason, the process of undertaking a lengthy and thorough period of consultation is necessary. As a consequence, unpopular parts of the plan can be amended or removed, and further information can be provided to those who have concerns. These concerns often being put to rest by providing a greater understanding of the operation. So this, in effect, has been a great opportunity for S&A to fly their flag and to inform local people about themselves, about what they do, and about how they do it. I hope that they've taken advantage of that opportunity and that they will take away from this exercise the advantage of being open and transparent and the value of involving the local people. When the application first came forward, the consultations produced over 100 representations, 76 of which raised objections and 36 were supportive. Many of these being extremely well thought out and presented and raising very valid points. So the response of the local residents, the local parish council and other interested parties has been much appreciated. This has been a super example of the process working and consultation making a difference. It was a great challenge to work through all of this correspondence and take this into account of the many opinions. Our council officers have done this. Consequently, a number of significant amendments have been made to the overall project. In other areas, it's been possible to provide information to a lay pupil's spheres, an example being the question of heavy traffic. The tractors and trailers which are going to be used in this proposed operation are small compared to those seen in many agricultural situations, and they are towing produce just back to the main farm, 6 journeys each way daily, and the advanced standard of suspension required for the good of the fruit will result in little road noise and little or no highway damage. After resubmission and these alterations having been made, the representations that were resulting from that numbered 24 in objection and 25 which were in support. So this is a significant difference by the virtue of the consultations in the representations that were made. So we really must thank the local people and the residents who've shown that they care, they've raised concerns, and as far as possible, these concerns have been listened to and acted upon. So consequently, they have enabled this application to be brought to the committee fully compliant with planning regulations and the core strategy requirements. We've heard a little about the employment of the number of people employed in Herefordshire, and I can tell you that the 121 full-time employees in Herefordshire, the average earnings of those is £687 per week, compared with the Herefordshire county average of £454 per week. I think we just heard this expressed as a matter of percentage, but it is highly significant. And incidentally, on a lighter note, by the number of romantic liaisons which have happened within the workforce, they are actually also helping to populate the local primary school. So now it is the job of the committee to hold their debate on this application and come to a decision on its merits. I look forward very much to hearing their discussions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. Could the public speakers please take their seats in the public gallery? Right. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. As a previous resident of Marden, S&A Davis were always seen as the bogeymen of the area, and of course when this application was first mooted, I think that reputation was enhanced somewhat. However, when I received this written report from Miss Genman, some of my opinions were dispelled, and we had this very comprehensive site visit yesterday, which was quite an eye-opener to how good this application could be. It was really quite an eye-opener. I have a couple of concerns. One is that there's a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit past the new entrance that's proposed for this site. It runs from in the east from the A1125 all the way down the A1124 through the village of Marden. And I would suggest, if it's possible, that the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit that's currently in the village be extended to the east all the way up to the junction with the 1125. I think 40 mile an hour is unrealistic there anyway. It's always been dangerous. And so that was just a recommendation that possibly we could look at a TRO for the future. The other concern is the tractors exiting the site are going, some parts of the year, they're going to have muddy wheels. And I'm wondering whether the 15-metre, is it 15 metres back, the gates to the site, I don't think there's going to be suitable for cleaning the wheels. And I'm wondering whether a wheel wash facility might be worthwhile there. There are a couple of informatives, number 4 and number 5, that mention not dropping mud in the road, but that's only an informative. It's not a set condition. And wheel washers are something that could be utilised quite easily. Otherwise, we could end up with a muddy track all the way through the village. However, I've got no real objections to the application, and I would, at this stage, recommend approval with conditions as listed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is that a proposal? Is that seconded? Are you seconding? So, Thomas. Yep, a question. Right. Thomas.
Where I live, my neighbour's got 75 hectares of tunnels. The last 2 applications he has had, the last one was 3 years ago. The conditions to have his tunnels meant that he had to remove the covers in the winter. When I asked this question yesterday, I was told that no, these will be permanently covered. Why is the difference in requirement?
Gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this application has been submitted for fixed covers to be on all year round. Certainly, that's how we have to assess the application. Certainly, my experience in recent years is that that growers have gone away from that because of the implications in terms of removing the tunnels. There's a cost implication for removing them, but also that the covers get damaged every time they're removed. They get damaged. So as it stands at the moment, by having fixed tunnels, that those covers have a lifespan of 3 years, and at the end of that, they can be recycled. So that's why most of the growers in Herefordshire have gone now for fixed tunnels rather than those seasonal tunnels which we used to see.
Right.
Thank you for that. yeah, there's sort of a little bit more. Yes, I don't. I say I've lived with these. I have tunnels of my own, and years ago I had quite a hectare or more tunnels. So I'm sort of a proponent of them, I suppose. Just other things. The lady from representing the objectors said about field fairs and Red Wings. Well, we have an awful lot of field fairs visit us. They don't visit anywhere around the polytunnels because nothing in the polytunnels produces food. If their fields were wheat, which would be the other alternative, again, there's no real feed for them. So I would probably disagree with the fact that they were going to see less. Sprays and sterile land. My neighbour removed 12 hectares recently on land that he had rented. That's gone back into agricultural production of wheat and various other crops, and there is absolutely been no side effect whatsoever. So again, I think that those two probably aren't probably correct. But I am fully supportive of this, and I'm happy to second it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Ms Denman for her comprehensive report and taking us through on the site visit yesterday. It's much appreciated. I have read through the majority, not all of the objections listed on the planning applicant site, and I thank those that have spoken today. I would rather not see the intensification of our countryside. That's a personal preference, but I also understand the need to weigh up the competing tourism versus rural economy provided through horticulture and agriculture. There is a successful business there that does support a large number of our population in that area, so we have to bear this in mind. Looking at the site, there were some real concerns I had, which you've picked up in condition 7 with regard to the terracing and levelling of the land formed towards the north of the site. As with the hedgerow and the proximity of the polytunnels to the hedgerow, and particularly the bridleway, it looks on the landscape plan as if you've got the hedgerow, then the access track, and then area of planting for sort of wildflower meadow, I think. I would like to see the hedgerow, then the planting of wildflowers, and then the access track to provide that additional set aside from the bridleway and from all boundaries, to be honest. I think that would increase the buffer and would be better with our LD3 core strategy policy particularly. I think that the hedging proposed, I very much welcome the mixed species, native species hedgerow. I'm pleased to see the height of that being managed to ensure visibility and screening. I would like to ensure that that is also on the eastern boundary of the site, particularly towards the settlements to the northeast of the site and the north, which currently have views. We didn't get quite to that point, but we could see. The other area of concern I have is the 56-metre splay, the removal of the hedgerow there, whether that can be reinstated with the sort of triangular form, so that there's a gateway without a kind of complete 56-metre gap in the hedgerow. I don't know if that's possible. I'm not sure if that's on the landscape plan. I couldn't quite make that out. And particularly the red line boundary for that area is particularly wide as it runs along the western boundary. Just want to make sure that those tree areas are captured in that landscape plan that's submitted. On balance, I am struggling with this one, so I'd like to hear what other people have to say. Thank you.
Other speakers, please. Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Chairman. I support very much what Councillor Baker said about the speed limit. It would be helpful if it could be reduced from 40 to 30, but just to remind members today, it does take a long time to change a speed limit, and already well over 100 traffic regulation orders for Herefordshire, so we are talking about a few years, even if it's approved by the police and others, but I think it's a good idea. Just a question to ask the officers. There's been mention in the reports of flooding in the area, and I wondered, with all the flooding from Storm Henk last week, whether there was any particular flooding in Marden near the polytunnels and what impact that may or may not have. I wonder if the officer could address that, please. But in general, I'm supportive of the application. Though I didn't visit these polytunnels for the site visits yesterday, I have visited quite a lot of other polytunnels around the county, and the soft fruit farming is certainly one of Herefordshire's great success stories, I would say, and with all the employment and other benefits. So in general, I support this application, but I'd like to have some reassurance on flooding and also some further comments on the speed of traffic, because there are going to be a lot more traffic in the area, because a lot more houses are being built in Marden, according to the report, as well as the tractors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Ms. Genman.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to flooding, certainly nothing's been brought to my attention. I have been on site over the last 2 weeks. I've been on site several times, and there's been no flooding on the site itself. I would, however, say that in the last 2 weeks, Hayward Lane has been closed because of flooding. One of the public speakers picked up on this. That road is regularly closed, which runs along the quarry by the River Lug. And at the same time, often the Morton on Lug Road, that can be closed as well. That's all from the river flooding. And at times when it does flood, again, the local resident picked up on this. Traffic has to find alternative routes depending on what's open. And so it is experienced that in terms of the traffic generation, it is experienced in a wider area, not just the village, but that is a result of local flooding.
Other speakers, please. Are there no further speakers on this item? Right, we have a proposer and a seconder for the... Sorry.
Chair, could we just have an answer from the planning officer with regard to Councillor Stone? Sorry, you did just do that, didn't you? Yes, sorry.
Yeah, it's normally me that falls asleep. Ms. Gibbons.
Just two things just to pick up on. One, there is a requirement in condition 5 for the wheel cleaning, wheel washing already proposed. So it's already in a condition. That's okay, I just thought I'd clarify that. And I think we'll take away, the application's been assessed on the basis of the 40 mile an hour, so we understand that's acceptable, but we'll take on board. We can't add a condition or try to address the requirement of a TRO. Obviously, Katie's here in terms of highway authority. There is some changes that will come with the committed site, residential site along that road as well, but it's not something we can progress through this, but noted.
Wales seems to be able to get speed limits in quicker than Herefordshire.
Sorry, can I just clarify, with the change that came through yesterday with regard to condition 7, we take the decision today based on that you will enforce that, and it's a delegated approval of that report that would be come through as condition 7, yeah?
The amended version's in the updates as an amended recommendation.
Right. Any further comments from the officers? None? No. Right, we'll go to the local member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very little more to say because I think we've heard a very thorough version of everything. A lot of queries have been raised and answered. 2 points I was going to make, Kelly Gibbons has just answered both of them. So, nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
We have a proposer and seconder of the recommendation as outlined in the agenda papers. Can I ask those in favour, please show? Those against? None against? Abstentions? Thank you, that is carried. move on as quickly as we can onto item. Sorry. Oh, right. Just a moment to change the officers. Can we take our seats, please? Gotta have their tea. Oh no, yeah. If Councillor Stone could take his seat, please. And could members of the public, please, if they're not sitting here, please leave the room, please. Right, we'll go now to item 8, which is Barley Knapp Farm. Can the speakers who public speakers please take their places. Ms. Salter on behalf of Peterchurch Parish Council, Mr. Eacock and Mr. Tompkins, I believe. Good morning. I welcome you to the meeting. I'll call you when the officer has made her presentation. Can I now ask Miss Elsie Morgan to make her presentation on item 8?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to those members who joined on site yesterday morning. The application is made in full and seeks planning permission and listed building consent for the proposed restoration of the Grade 2 listed farmhouse and the conversion of the attached granary to an annex, the conversion of a stone barn to 2 dwellings, and the construction of 2 new build dwellings in lieu of an extant prior approval under Class Q of the General Permitted Development Order for the conversion of the existing modern portal-framed agricultural building into 2 dwellings. The application site indicated by the star is located 1.5 kilometres northwest of the village of Peterchurch, accessed via Long Lane and a farm track serving the existing buildings. The farmstead comprises the Grade 2 listed farmhouse, traditional stone barn with cart shed and modern portal-framed agricultural shed. I will present each aspect of the proposal in turn. Next slide, please. In this instance, the site lies outside of any identified settlement under the core strategy or NDP, and it is therefore considered to be within open countryside. Accordingly, policy RA3 is relevant in order to assess the principle of the new housing in this location, having regard for the 2 proposed new builds. No exceptional circumstances have been advanced to satisfy policy RA3, and I find the principle of new residential development to run counter to the spatial strategy of the development plan. However, the permission granted under application 220162 for the conversion of the barns to 2 dwellings is a key material consideration of relevance in assessing this scheme. This prior approval notice provides a clear evidence of an intention and ability to develop, which puts the approved Class Q scheme as a fallback position beyond reasonable doubt. As detailed in the committee report, paragraphs 6.9 to 10, of relevance here is the Mansell case law, which firstly clarifies that a Class Q scheme is capable of being a fallback position as an alternative development scheme, and secondly confirms the position that a proposal which offers a better redevelopment opportunity in planning terms than that which could be achieved by a fallback position should be given appropriate weight. In this case, the Class Q provides clear evidence of intention and ability to develop, and it's considered that this is a material consideration of critical importance and that it should be afforded significant weight. Essentially, this is a comparative assessment between the outcomes of the fallback position and the benefits to be derived from the proposed. Next slide, please. The proposal seeks to construct 2 detached dwellings in lieu of the 2 units approved under the Class Q, one located on the site of the existing barn and one to the southwest of the farmstead. These are identified on the plans as Units C and D. The portal frame barn is a typical functional structure of little architectural value, having a generally negative impact upon the setting of the historic farmstead, being in a prominent location near the listed buildings on site. As such, their removal and replacement with high-quality dwellings is an opportunity to visually improve the site. Next slide, please. The first dwelling, annotated C on the proposed plans, is the long barn, which would be a single unit providing 4 bedrooms. This is proposed to be constructed of timber cladding and corrugated metal roofing to reflect the agricultural and rural character of the farmstead. This would utilise the same ridge height of the existing modern agricultural shed and has been designed to reflect the agricultural buildings of architectural merit on the site. The scale and form of the building takes reference from the existing stone barn, utilising a simple rectangular layout. The long barn would be located on the site of the steel portal barn, albeit at a different orientation. However, this would relate well to the historic farm group and integrate with longer views. This replacement of the existing built form on the site would be considered a visual improvement, since the modern barn offers little in way of heritage or landscape merit. Next slide, please. The second dwelling, annotated as D, is the embedded unit. The proposed location away from the farm lends itself to the provision of a more contemporary design, nestled into and making use of the hillside, in a landscape and setting-led approach. This would be less visually prominent than the long barn form and reads as more in keeping with the immediate surroundings, utilising the gradients of the site to sit onto the hillside. The grass roof would visually integrate the unit into the landscape and aid the built form in extending naturally from the topography. The exposed elevation would be constructed of timber to read in keeping with the natural landscape and draw minimal attention through limited glazing. Next slide, please. With regards to residential amenity, it is not considered that the proposal would have an adverse impact on the amenity of neighbouring residents in terms of loss of privacy, overbearing or noise, given the sufficient distance between nearby dwellings. The proposed dwellings are orientated in a manner so to not overlook other occupants within the farmstead, with sufficient private amenity space provided for each unit. The Environmental Health Officer raises no objection to the scheme on the matters of noise or nuisance. Next slide, please. Moving on to other elements of the application, the barn conversion is primarily assessed against policy RA5 of the core strategy. The existing building is considered to be of permanent and substantial construction, which is capable of conversion without needing major or complete reconstruction. This would result in 2 3-bedroom dwellings. The barn is considered and appears on visual inspection to be capable of conversion without major or complete reconstruction, and the conversion scheme utilises the existing material and structure. Existing openings are retained where possible, and any new openings respect the agricultural character of the building. The existing grey corrugated metal roof and elevational cladding would be replaced by a black corrugated steel, and the large barn doors are retained as shutters. Given the heritage status of the building, the additional interventions are considered acceptable in planning balance to secure the future use of the historic asset. It is evident that the barn retains its agricultural character, and that the proposed development being within the scope of the existing building and utilising existing openings in a sympathetic manner. The Principal Building Conservation Officer's comments are of direct relevance, with no objection raised, accepting that the building is no longer suitable for modern farming practices, and therefore the sympathetically designed conversion would offer the most viable use going forward. Next slide, please. The stone farmhouse is a Grade 2 listed in its own right, and it's noted that the building requires restoration and updating. This offers the opportunity to reverse some modern interventions that fail to respect the historic character. As noted by the Principal Building Conservation Officer, the return to sandstone roof tiles and replacement of existing modern windows are considered conservation gains. Other external interventions of benefit include rebuilding the chimney stack in stone, characterful removal and reopening of appropriate openings, insertion of conservation roof lights and repointing in lime mortar. The Building Conservation Officer raises no objection to the internal work, stating that this is a well-considered scheme, respecting the existing character and fabric of the listed asset. Additionally, the repair and conversion of the redundant granary is considered acceptable, retaining existing openings, spatial and structural form, whilst remaining subservient to the host dwelling, given its ancillary relationship. In considering the wider heritage implications in terms of the setting of the listed asset, it's recognised that the proposal would represent an intensification of residential use. However, this has been proposed in a manner that respects the historic character and significance of the listed asset and their setting. The proposal offers conservation gains through the removal of the portal frame barn, the repair and conservation of a redundant historic barn, and the conservation of a historically important farmhouse. As such, it's considered that any heritage harm that would occur is considered to be less than substantial, and in the NPPF's paragraph 208 test, it's considered that this harm would be outweighed by the benefits of the scheme. Next slide, please. This slide shows in the left image a long view onto the application site with the existing farmstead visible. The right image shows the location of the proposed solar panels and their location and screen planting on the plan below. In considering the initial comments from the landscape officer, it's accepted that the proposed dwelling 2 occupies a separate location from the main farmstead, and in this sense would be a departure from the existing character of the site and introduce new built form in a currently undeveloped field. However, it's considered that the design approach through embedding the unit into the hillside would reduce adverse visual impacts in the wider setting and would not detract from the overarching historic settlement pattern of sporadic agricultural units characterising the area. This location and approach is argued to contribute positively to the character and architectural interest of the rural area through good design, whilst allowing the farmhouse and historic unit to remain the principal built form on the site. Following the submission of the landscape management plan and rebuttal letter, a further consultation response was provided, concluding that the principle of sympathetic renovation and reuse of existing buildings would have minimal impact upon the landscape, and recognising that there is a benefit to be achieved through the removal of the large portal frame barn and replacement with long barn style dwelling. No objection is raised to the meadowgrass roof of the embedded dwelling, tree and orchard planting and soft landscaping plans, with conditions recommended to secure full specifications for hard and soft landscaping, material colour and finishes, and the removal of permitted development rights. 5 small solar arrays are proposed to serve each residential unit to the south of the field behind the embedded dwelling. Behind existing hedgerow. These would be ground mounted and would not be widely visible, with new trees planted to the north to further screen the additions. Their siting is considered acceptable given the distance from the listed building and other dwellings, and the proposed appropriate screening. It's not considered that they would have wider adverse impact given their low-lying nature and roadside position. Next slide, please. In terms of highways impacts, the local concerns are noted in terms of increased traffic movements. However, no technical objection is raised by the highways engineer team leader. The number of additional vehicle movements over and above what could already be generated via existing or consented uses would be minimal and would not be considered severe in NPPF terms. The site offers sufficient parking and turning space for the proposed residential units, with access to be gained via existing field track entrance. This is to be surfaced with local stone gravel with no edging to maintain an agricultural appearance. Conditions are included to secure cycle storage, access surface, gradient and construction traffic management plan in light of the nature of the highways network. Moving on to other comparative benefits of the proposal, though the scheme is considered neutral in terms of its accessibility to services and facilities, given both the fallback and current scheme are outside any identified settlements, the proposal includes sustainable features through design, including maximising solar gain, intention to attain elemental U values, air source heat pumps and solar array to the field south of the dwellings. These features would not be secured through the Class Q. Next slide, please. The Prow and Rambler Association comments are taken into consideration and the applicant is aware of the formal requirements. However, it's recognised that the formal diversion would not be undertaken until the application is determined. It is noted that the existing footpath dissects the modern barn and therefore the diversion is likely to offer improvements, moving the track away from the stone barn also. An informative has been included to remind the applicant of the required procedure. Next slide, please. The application has been supported by a BAT survey report and Phase 1 extended ecological survey, which has been reviewed by the Council's ecologist. No objection is raised to their findings, subject to conditions to secure the relevant recommendations, including EPS mitigation licence from Natural England. During the course of the application, Natural England has advised changes to the impact risk zone boundaries where habitat regulation assessments are required. This now includes the proposal site and the HRA process has therefore been triggered. The ecologist has completed the appropriate assessment, finding no adverse effects on the integrity of the River Wye Special Conservation Area. This has been sent to Natural England for formal consultation, who have raised no objection. The site lies within the flood zone 1 and, as defined by the Environment Agency, has a low probability of flooding. Surface water will be discharged to an attenuation basin where possible, which will then be discharged to the Black Brook to the north of the site through a combined discharge pipe. Foul water would be managed through a packaged treatment plant, which would discharge to the Black Brook. The drainage layout has been amended to lay pipework along the hedgerow to avoid accidental damage from farming activity, and the red line revised to include the drainage systems to secure future management. It's noted that the representations received state that the Black Brook is a seasonal watercourse. However, it's considered on balance there's sufficient evidence to conclude that the Black Brook is a sufficient enough watercourse with a base flow to accept a discharge from the proposed water management systems. Additionally, the Environment Agency general binding rules state new discharges must be made to a watercourse that normally has flow throughout the year. It should be noted that the binding rules do not state that the watercourse must be permanent, only that there is normal flow throughout the year. The land drainage engineer has raised no objection to the scheme on this basis. Next slide, please. Having established that the Class Q scheme is a fallback position that can be afforded significant weight in your officer's view, the most straightforward manner of assessing whether planning permission should be granted for the current application is to consider the comparative impacts of the schemes. It's been established that the removal of existing modern portal-framed barn and the replacement with one long barn-style dwelling and one embedded dwelling would result in conservation and landscape gains. These are afforded significant weight in the planning balance given the listed status of the farmhouse. It's recognised that there is identified harm in terms of the intensification of the residential use, as well as new built forms separated from the agricultural unit. However, as discussed, it is considered that the design approach and detailing of the proposed restoration, conservation and the long barn dwelling is appropriate in retaining the agricultural character of the site, with conservation gains through the reversal of the modern interventions to the farmhouse. The holistic view of the proposal is considered to offer an appropriate betterment that is afforded significant weight in the context of the listed asset and the extant fallback position, in order to outweigh the identified harm and policy tension with regard to RA3. In addition to this, the embedded dwelling has been designed to minimise adverse visual impact through the use of a grass roof and its response to the contours of the land. Other benefits to be secured through the proposal include the provision of renewable energy sources, sustainable features through the new build, and additional green infrastructure planting. As such, it is officer opinion that the proposal offers an opportunity for a comprehensive and coherent redevelopment of the site as a whole, encompassing the identified benefits, as opposed to a piecemeal form of development that would arise when the applicant implements the permitted development rights. The proposed conversion of the threshing barn to 2 residential units is considered acceptable and complies with the requirements of RA5. The reuse and restoration of the threshing barn and farmhouse has been considered in a sympathetic manner so to retain the agricultural character whilst providing the most viable future use for the heritage assets. No other technical objection has been received from statutory and internal consultees, and it's considered that the proposed development accords with the development plan, and it's therefore recommended that planning permission and listed building consent be granted subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Morgan. Now I go to the speakers. Can I ask Ms Alter on behalf of Peterchurch Parish Council? You have 3 minutes.
I'm Sandra Salter from Peterchurch Parish Council. There was a large parish council meeting with most of the residents of Long Lane present and very unhappy with the lack of credibility of many of the reports. The parish council objected to the application on the following grounds. Long Lane is steep and narrow, in places only just over 2 metres wide. The passing places are people's private driveways with long reverses necessary. There are 21 houses on Long Lane, and this will be another 5 large houses towards the top. The highways report is frankly incredible. The land is still being farmed, so there can only be a large increase in traffic. All journeys will be by car, as it's over 1.5 miles to the nearest shop or bus stop, which has an infrequent service. During the construction phase, there will be disruption to all of the people who live and work on Long Lane, as the lorries will totally fill the road. The drainage system is inadequate for this development. Black Brook is dry for many months of the year. The Environment Agency policy states that treated sewage must be discharged to a flowing watercourse. This has been totally ignored, as most objections mention the lack of water in Black Brook. Black Brook eventually reaches the Wye at Monmouth, making it part of Welsh Wye SAC, which is not allowing any development which increases phosphates. This development will of course do just that. The water supply to Long Lane is high pressure and erratic. Welsh Water says that a new main will be necessary. This has not been addressed in the application. The new dwellings are intrusive and out of keeping with the vernacular architecture. They're contrary to all planning law, such as sustainability and RA3 building in a rural area. Due to their elevated position, they will have a negative visual impact on neighbouring properties, footpaths and from the road. They are also well outside Peterchurch development area. The ecology report was questioned. There are known to be barn owls nesting in the barn, and in this sparsely populated, beautiful Marches farmland, there are large numbers of badgers and other wildlife. In summary, this application flies in the face of planning law and has gathered an enormous number of objections for such a scattered population. There is great concern that if this is passed, it will open the door to using Class Q to allow excessive development in open countryside.
Thank you. Can I now ask Mr. Eacock to speak on behalf of objectors? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. My name is Bernard Eacock. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute for the last 24 years. I'm speaking as a local resident and on behalf of the 48 objectors. There are three basic components to the case before you. Firstly, that Class Q permission provides a fallback position. Secondly, the traditional stone barn is curtilage listed. And thirdly, that it would be beneficial to relocate the Class Q development to improve the setting of the listed barn. With respect to case law, Mansell merely confirms that Class Q permissions can be relied upon as a fallback development. However, the legal authority on fallback is enshrined in Gambone, a different piece of case law. The primacy of the case law is confirmed by the Planning Inspectorate in many appeal decisions. Gambone requires 3 factors to be considered. Firstly, is there a greater than theoretical possibility of a fallback development taking place? And if there is a greater than theoretical possibility, what weight should be ascribed? To determine the amount of weight you ascribe, Gambone requires a qualitative assessment of impact to be made. If the alternative development would be less harmful than the fallback, only then is a genuine fallback established in law. Advice from Historic England and the Institute of Historic Building Conservation contradicts the Historic Building Officer's assessment that the stone barn is curtilage listed. The so-called benefit this development would bring is therefore highly questionable. Your landscape officers are also conflicted. One officer raised concerns with the submitted landscape and visual appraisal, but the other waved it through without any fundamental changes being made to the scheme. Conversely, Carly Tinkler, a notable and published expert on landscape matters, has raised grave concerns. To quote her comments, the applicant's LVA contains several omissions, incorrect assumptions, errors and technical flaws. As a result, levels of value, susceptibility to change, sensitivity, magnitude of effect and overall effect have been underestimated. The above in mind, the proposed scheme would not be beneficial to the barn and be more harmful to the landscape than the Class Q development. As such, Gambone confirms that a genuine fallback does not therefore exist in law, and if you proceed, your decision could be challenged in the High Court. In addition, the entire foul drainage assessment is based upon the mistaken assumption that Blackbrook is non-seasonal, but it is dry for at least 6 months of the year, close to 9 months last year. Your drainage officers appear to be blissfully unaware of this simple fact, despite many objectors pointing it out. The scheme may very well result in unacceptable pollution to the water environment. You are the responsible authority. This error needs to be corrected. If you are going to use the fallback position provided by the Class Q permission for anything, it would be better to justify the conversion of the stone barn to the 2 dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you. Now can I ask Mr. Tompkins to speak on behalf of the applicant? Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicants, Matthew and Julia, who have a 50-year-long association with the area. They hope to make Barley Knapp their home, where they can live and work from for their 3 sons and their family too. The application before you is the culmination of 3 years' work, and which included significant input from the Council's planning, heritage and landscape officers, for which the applicants are grateful. Early pre-application meetings focused on the principle of development and agreeing building locations, whilst later meetings discussed very detailed matters such as the type of tiles to be used on the roof of the listed building. Matthew and Julia have incorporated officers' advice into the scheme throughout and consider the proposals to be improved for officers' involvement. The applicants also carried out community consultation before making the submission, meeting with their neighbours, presenting at 2 parish council meetings and liaising with the ward councillor. The core of the resultant proposal is the restoration, reuse and enhancement of neglected buildings, including the Grade 2 farmhouse and associated barns. The renovation and repurposing of the buildings should ensure they contribute to the fabric of the area for years to come, and the applicants are very pleased to note the Conservation Officer's support for these elements and the benefits he feels are gained therefrom. The other main part of the scheme is the erection of the 2 new dwellings, which are proposed in lieu of an extant Class Q permission at the site for the conversion of the large portal-framed cattle shed to 2 dwellings. One new dwelling, House C, is a smaller barn-like building whose design is based on a traditional Herefordshire long barn, and this would sit on the site of the existing cattle shed. The other, House D, is embedded into the west flank of the hilltop, concealed by trees, with planting and is grassed roof. This would appear as part of the existing cluster of buildings too. The scheme also includes comprehensive landscape, ecology, microgeneration enhancements, which would result in a proposal which truly responds to the Council's climate emergency and biodiversity emergency. Specific elements include significant new hedgerow planting, new trees and a solar array. Planning law supports approval of a scheme which is environmentally preferable to an established fallback position. Your officer's report sets this out in detail. Notably, the Conservation Officer and Landscape Officer both recognise that the removal of the cattle shed and its replacement with the 2 new build dwellings, which are of a much smaller scale and high quality design, would bring about enhancement to the landscape and to the setting of the listed buildings. Councillors, the overall benefit of this appropriate, sustainable and balanced proposal outweighs the impacts, and we respectfully request your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you could take your seats back in the public gallery, please. Thank you. And now the local member is Councillor Philip Price, and if he will make his opening presentation, you have 10 minutes, Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank the members for turning up to the site meeting yesterday morning to get an on-site perspective of why this became a controversial application that needed to be referred here today. Whilst very cold, you did get to see the area in all its glory with the sun shining and a clear sky, and what a location this site is. A number of concerns have been brought to my attention by a considerable number of objectors, all of which are covered in the report before you. Because the report has been a long time in the making, every point has a good description and plausible reasoning that suggests why would you not support the application in full. I would just point out that I was not the ward member at the time that this has been mostly in the concept of coming forward, as it has been a very long time in the making. The first issue is how much traffic, if any, increase will be generated, and will the long lane coming up from the village of Peterchurch cope with it? I leave you that for you to debate. Secondly, there is the position of how queue planning is interpreted. It appears that queue planning was obtained prior to this application and is now described as the fallback position, whereby that permission granted the development of the agricultural steel and asbestos building into 2 properties. I think it reasonable for you to satisfy yourself exactly what that fallback position is in terms of visual development and whether or not it takes on the form of the exact building as it is. Clearly, the original intention of permitted development rights under Class Q was that any development was to maintain the shape, format and structure of the building in question. What has happened over time is that a Q-class permission has had the goalposts moved to the extent that further planning applications can be applied for that changes this interpretation. In this case, this application is to realign the permitted development rights and apply a betterment interpretation. That, in the eyes of many local objectors, has an outcome that in any specific individual application would not be allowed. It is suggested by a local planning consultant that has objected in the responses to the consultation that in planning case law there are areas of difficulty with how the Class Q position, and this application may not align in planning and case law. It is clear Sorry, I flicked up too high. I'm sorry, a minute. It is clear that the time lapse for this application is unacceptable to the determination, with many items having been addressed, reassessed and changed, and positions across many organisations and consultees seem to have arrived at a place where every part of the report has edged towards accepting every strand of change. The applicants have had pre-planning application advice and considerable input and change over the period, and the planning officer report looks very acceptable with what is before you. Whilst there are a few considerations that are challenging, I think the potential enhancement from the fallback Q class to this report is what causes most concerns. When I was first acquainted with this application back early last year, and with feedback from my previous experience on council, I was led to understand that the shape and form of a Q-class consent under permitted development rights had to retain the building as is. I can see that over time, changes to these rights have taken on a new direction. How far these changes have gone can be seen by the arguments put forward in this report. I would neither like to live in or have next to me the fallback development of the Class Q permission dwellings, as I think this is not helpful to the landscape or the other developments on site. But that is just my opinion. But does that allow for taking down the old building and allowing one new build and one other embedded house some way from the original building? This is for you to determine whether planning and case law allows it, whether there is a betterment and to whom, or whether there is less harm to the landscape is for you to consider. Paragraph 6.22 seems relevant to this. The Parish Council are not supporting this application. They have a number of concerns, many itemised at para 5.3, and as put to you by the Parish Council speaker today. The Welsh Water response to the consultation in November 22 states the water supply system in the immediate vicinity has insufficient capacity to serve the development and will also cause detriment to existing customers' water supply. How has or is this being dealt with? They and others reference the grey water discharge to the Black Brook. Following the site visit yesterday, I walked down to the stream to see if this is a problem. I felt that the sheer distance involved that a considerable amount of discharge could go to ground long before reaching the stream if it were allowed to drain. And whether or not the stream goes dry in certain times of year, it clearly has the capacity for a large flow and has over the years, as it is very well established and not just a ditch, with a good flow of water on the day. Issues over Long Lane itself and capacity for what might be a small increase in traffic will be something you should consider. You arrived and left and can make up your mind about that. The listed house and barn conversion into two dwellings I fully support and will bring back life to the properties in need of repair and refunctioning, can only be seen as the right thing. I asked for this application to be considered a committee, as originally I felt the initial plans for pods and embedded dwelling were not acceptable in an open greenfield site. As the plan has developed over time, you have the decision to take whether or not this is worthy of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Can I just clarify a couple of things about Q? Because, I mean, I think a lot of people don't fully understand it and interpretation. It's something that I don't think most planners are very happy with. I'm certainly not, and I've seen some pretty horrendous things done. But government have imposed this policy on local authorities, and we have to. Do you want to make any comments about this, Gibbons? I know planners are very unhappy about it, but we have it, and there's little we can do about that. So.
Yeah, I think I just say it's been embedded for a while. You know, we've been Class Q since, I think, Class Q since 2016, and before that, Class MB. So it's been part of that permitted regime for some time now, and this is something that's evolved from that process over that time. I think we've discussed it a couple of times in this committee already.
We'll open debate. Councillor Thomas.
Right, Park Q. Now, in my ward, I've just had a Park Q conversion turned down because, in the opinion of the planning officer, it's not convertible without considerable amount of work. Now, this is an agricultural building, a cattle shed. I looked at it, yesterday, and remembering my trade was converting buildings. It was never really convertible into a house. So I suspect that, I don't know how it was allowed to get Park Q, but it really shouldn't have done, unless I'm misreading the Act. Secondly, you are taking that building down, and you're going to put another building, a more traditional style of building, on the footprint. But in fact, it only just sits on the very edge of the footprint. You can see that quite clearly from the plan, and we could see that yesterday. So that I've got a problem with. And I've got a major problem with this construction of a house away from the rest of the buildings. I think that is really taking. I know it's probably it looks a very nice design, etc., etc. But I'm totally in agreement with the ward councillor that this is going to open a complete avalanche. If you look just from where we were stood yesterday, I can see 6 little farms that this could easily. Oh well, they've got it. We'll apply for this. I think this is just one, it is a step far too far. This is just, to my actual opinion, greed on the part of the person developing this site. There is no need for it. I have no problem with moving the cattle shed and putting up another building which looks far more traditional. I have absolutely no problem in converting the barn, the house and the granary. Absolutely, they're going to fall down otherwise, and this is the only way of saving beautiful old buildings. But this is totally, I think, unacceptable, this interpretation of Park Q. And we've heard from the expert who came up, and he considers we leave ourselves totally open. So I'm afraid I'm not going to go along with this development at all. On that, because the only way to get rid of this extra house is to refuse.
Mr. McKinn.
Thank you, Chair. I just a point for clarification, really, in terms of the presentations. We've had 2 references to case law, Mansell and Garnham. In fact, they are the same case. So I just want to make that clear. They're just labelled in a different way.
Yeah. Can I say that was the intention of the government to bring in policy Q for no other reason other than increase the number of houses that are built. No other reason. You might like it, but that's what the government intended, to change the policy in that way.
Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree, and I don't disagree with Park Q. There are some conversions that are brilliant, but the rules state they have to be convertible. And the present cattle shed is not convertible, whichever way, shape or form. And to use Park Q to take it down and put something else back in its place, yes, put up another building similar to what the old barn is like, no problem. But to go and put a building 100 metres away in a field, which is, you've got this beautiful area, was it Vega Hill up there, massive, massive common, thousands of people walk up there. I've been up there quite a few times. It's the most beautiful valley looking down, back down towards Peterchurch. And I just think it's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous to sort of stretch Park Q to this level. And I don't think the Act was ever intended for that.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation.
Barley Farm is a very special jewel in the crown of farmsteads in Peterchurch in the Golden Valley. We were fortunate to have a clear day to appreciate the spectacular views. Worthy of consideration, if we can see far-reaching views from the farmstead, then the farmstead itself is visible from far and wide. I'm in no doubt that the Grade 2 listed farmhouse, attached granary and conversion of the stone barns is ultimately safeguarding and extending the life of the farmstead. The existing farm buildings are unspoilt and ripe for conversion. And in my understanding, Class Q ensures the modification is limited to the existing footprint of the original structure of the barns. However, I fear the new dwelling in open countryside will not enhance the settlement and might even create a precedence, which you refer to, in the future for other developments. And I commend the location of the solar panels too. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. An extremely interesting application. The site visit yesterday was extremely useful, and Miss Morgan's comprehensive report plus the information she provided to us yesterday all helped to enable me to form a positive view of the application. I think I speak for all of us when we express our concerns regarding Class Q, but it is what it is and we're stuck with it. The detached, or rather the proposed detached new building to the hillside, again is an extremely interesting prospect, and it obviously falls under RA3 in the core strategy, but it could be considered to be acceptable as it was of an innovative design, tucked into the hillside, grass roof, and we've heard that it's possible it could set a precedent, but of course we don't set precedents in planning, do we? Each application is determined on its own merits, so I think we should forget about precedents. The restoration of the listed farmhouse is well overdue. I mean, that will end up, if it's developed, into an extremely attractive building. The surrounding barns, as we saw yesterday, one of the ex-cattle shed is virtually falling down. And I think we were told that the frame of that building will be utilised within the new restoration. I think that was right. But of course, with the development on the site, it's got to improve these barns, and that's, I suppose, where Class Q comes in useful. However, we're told all about the long lane. I'd never driven up there before. It was a narrow, steep road, and it's certainly long, but I didn't meet anyone coming the other way, and on the way out we followed a tractor all the way down, so there was no major problems. And there appears to be passing places here and there along the lane, and the current residents appear to manage, so why shouldn't some extras? And so my view is that, this application in its entirety should be approved with the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that a proposal or proposal? Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Foxton. Right. Other speakers, please, in the debate. Are there any? None? Right. We have Councillor Simons.
So, thank you, Chair. This is presenting real problems to me. I absolutely can understand the Class Q. I understand the fallback position. I understand that this is betterment. I do have absolute concerns about development in open countryside. We are being asked to set aside our core strategy policy as part of the planning balance. I am concerned about the drainage into the brook on the information that's been supplied from the public gallery. I am not convinced that are we being asked to consent this on the understanding that there's a condition attached that will do further investigative work before any development could consent on this? Could you just clarify that for me, please?
Sorry, yeah, there's a condition requiring the detailed drawings to be submitted. I think the other work has all been explored with the drainage consultant and with ecology as part of that wider HRA matter. And it is a requirement of the binding rules outside of that as well.
I think the issue is that we have been given evidence, and I am not fully convinced that our drainage experts have that level of detail of that site, and that for me is a real concern. I'm hearing two opposing sides, that there is for the majority of the year flow, and then I'm hearing actually 6 months to 9 months no flow. I'm feeling a bit conflicted here without some sort of, I don't want to defer this. I appreciate we have to make a decision. It's been going on too long and it's causing problems for everybody. But I don't know how I feel on this, I'm afraid.
Taking legal advice.
I mean, the application's been sort of held for quite some time whilst we've been resolving the HRA issue. So the issues that have been raised locally have been taken into account by the ecologist and you know, the drainage engineer to get to a point of a no objection, as I'm sure you're aware, can take some time in that respect as well. There is the Environment Agency binding rules that they need to adhere to as well. And building regs will pick up on that as well in terms of the drainage arrangements. I'm assuming that the Class Q would also use a similar arrangement in terms of a fallback position. It's just that we have more control over that with this application. Bearing in mind the level of sort of technical scrutiny it's been to, and it's also been to Natural England to do that, absolutely take on board, you know, local residents have raised a different opinion, but I think, you know, in terms of what officers have seen and have been able to explore, you know, they've come to a conclusion that there is no objection. We've done the appropriate assessment. It's been to Natural England it's received a no objection from them. It's got no objection subject to conditions from the drainage engineer. Plus there is also EA binding rules that need to be taken into account. So I think all of those matters can, I'm not sure we can add additional condition to look at monitoring, etc.
Thank you, appreciate that, Kelly.
Sorry, I'm afraid we don't have politicians from the gallery. Sorry. If you're going to interrupt the meeting, this is a quasi-judicial process, and I'd have to ask you to leave if you're going to participate, try to participate. Right, any other speakers? No. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. This has been quite an interesting proposition. We had a fantastic presentation from Miss Morgan. Yesterday's site visit was really good, and there are some conflicting issues here, drainage being one of them from the site, the Class Q issue, and also the proposed new building. Lots of concerns raised by the locals over this site, I think of which a lot of them have been addressed. Part of my concern was the proposed new building in the field off to the west of the site. But having seen the architectural developments that have been proposed with the grass roof, etc., I think that probably allays a lot of my fears. And I propose that we accept this officer's proposal to accept the planning request for this. Thank you.
Can I say we're not setting a precedent as far as this is concerned, because we've done it in building something in Colwell, which I personally objected to at the time, but Cradley, sorry, which I objected to at the time. But it, as I say, it wouldn't be a precedent. Right. Any other speakers? Sorry, I'm afraid. No, I'm afraid. Councillor Cole.
With all this fuss about going into the Black Brook with this water and stuff, if the sewage is kept separate from the stormwater, there's surely enough by the size of the site to put it into soakaways. Has that been looked into to alleviate that, so that only the stormwater goes into the brook? Has that been looked into? It hasn't.
Regulations and standards.
Well, I've seen them put into soakaways.
No, I'd rather leave it to one planning.
So that's not been looked into. We've got a package treatment plant managing the foul water, which is discharging to the brook. It's a combined system, so the surface water is going to an attenuation pond through the combined pipe into the brook.
Why has it got to be combined? Because that causes a lot of problems. Why can't it be kept separate? Stormwater and...
So the from a package treatment plant, the foul drainage is treated and then discharged. So they're not. So the discharge. So the surface water is attenuated. The smaller amount, I suppose, of the foul drainage goes directly into the brook through that system. We have got a condition, if that allows us to look at the details of that drainage arrangement. I think it's been agreed in principle with the details. Bear with me. Keep finding this condition. So prior to occupation of the development or new dwellings hereby approved, the following shall be submitted and approved. That's a detailed surface and water drainage design, plans and construction drawings, including those associated calculations. So we can take it away and we can raise that issue and ask the question. I'm happy to do that. But in principle, the way that it's been promoted and been dealt with as part of the HRA is that it goes into a combined, but it is the same pathway. So I'm not concerned about the HRA side of it changing, but we can look at the technical details of that if you would take that away.
Right. Now we move on to... Sorry, Councillor.
Just simply that a package system can be, and soakaways can be used. You do not have to put it into an open water course. The regulations state you can put it into an open water course. But in this situation, I think it's mad to take it down to a dry brook.
So just to clarify, yeah, the percolation testing has been undertaken and it was ruled out that they could use soakaways, so it has to go.
Right, we've got that clear now. Right, any further comments?
No, I don't think so. I think we've had a good debate on that.
I'll go then to the local member.
You can see why this was brought to committee, because it is very, very controversial on a number of points. Let's just look at what we've just been discussing. My point was that it is a very long way down to the Black Brook from the site, and whilst we have no evidence of what the permeability of the land is in relation, because we don't have it in the report, it says it hasn't, it failed. I do not believe for one moment on the side of that particular site that a drainage pipe that runs for many hundreds of yards on a French drain type principle would soak away into the land way before it ever got near to the Black Brook. And that would address the issues that are raising concerns with many of the local members, the local residents. Now, I'm sure that can be resolved. I don't know about the other things, the Class Q, whether it's acceptable or not. The chairman is saying that this is already, in principle, acceptable. It was the one thing that I've had many conversations with residents that they think it's not acceptable over a period of many months. So it is up for you to decide whether it's acceptable to take it or not. I think this site should be allowed to develop, but whether or not this is the right development will remain to be seen. And I'm sure if you don't accept it today, it will come back in a different form at some future time. I'm still not sure about the Welsh water scenario. Nobody's addressed it. Is there water availability up there? Is there a massive expense to get water there? Is there going to be boreholes? If there aren't, do we run into the same sort of problems that we have had in other applications on the uplands of the Golden Valley, whereby people have sunk deeper boreholes to take the water from the lesser deep ones? It's happened many times in the last 20 years. I don't know. It's got to be addressed. If you pass this application today, it must be a consideration as to how that's going to be dealt with, because many residents up in a long lane, you've heard them. There's 20 odd properties along there, and I understand there's a property, an application has just come in for outline for another 10 houses in the same vicinity, a bit lower down. Water is a problem that we all expect to have. It must be resolved. We just cannot grant permission without having knowledge and acceptance of how it's going to be dealt with. So if you're going to pass it, I want a condition that says how this is going to be dealt with without detriment to any other residents in Long Lane and Peterchurch. Other than that, it's the Long Lane itself. It was mentioned you don't have a problem and there's passing places, but every single passing place in Long Lane is somebody's drive. It's not a matter of there's a lay-by for you to pull in, you know, in a sight line of seeing another vehicle coming. They're all people's drives. So I leave it with you. You've discussed all of the individual aspects that are causing major concern here. I still have a few concerns that I want to be conditioned or considered. And I'll leave it with you to make the decision. Thank you.
We'll move on now to the vote. We have a proposer and seconder for the recommendation as outlined in the report. Can I ask those in favour, please show. Those against? 2 against. Abstentions? 3. Okay, then that is carried. We'll move now quickly to a short one, which the Vice Chairman will take over for this, because it's I'm the local.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, we're vacating the room, please. The button on your right-hand side. Thank you. The ninth, attender item 9, please. We're looking at Westerings, Kington, Herefordshire, HR5 3HE. Proposed demolition of existing side and rear extension, erection of replacement side and rear extensions, and a new porch. Can I just ask the officer presenting?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. The slide shown demonstrates the context in which the site is found on the southern outskirts of the town of Kington, and the wider context highlighting the character of the surrounding area. Next slide, please. This image shows the site outlined in red with an aerial photograph to further demonstrate the surrounding context. It's located to the east of the U91029 and forms part of a linear collection of dwellings running north to south along Kingswood Road. Next slide, please. This further demonstrates the location within the context of surrounding dwellings. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the existing dwelling in both plan and scaled elevations. The next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide demonstrates the proposal for the demolition of the existing rear extension and the attached garage. This will be followed by the erection of a replacement rear extension, new extension to the side, and a new porch. The rear extension would protrude 4.5 metres in width, 8.9 metres in height, with a maximum ridge height of 4.5 metres. There's also a small flat-roofed utility room protruding off this, measuring 2.2 by 4 metres. The proposed front porch would measure 2.2 by 1.5 metres with a ridge height of 3 metres, clad in stone and plain clay tile roof. The existing attached garage will be demolished to be replaced with a single-storey structure which will run at circa 45 degrees to the main dwelling house. This element will measure 6.5 metres long, 6.8 metres wide, with an overall height of 2.3 metres. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates an illustrative render of the proposed development, including the materials. These materials are stone and render to match that of the host dwelling, in addition to roofing, which is also to match. Next slide, please. Go. The proposed rear extension and porch have been designed in a manner that reflects the host dwelling, utilising matching render, stone and plain clay tiles. This will ensure continuity in appearance. The proposed flat roof utility extension will be clad in vertical cedar boarding under a simple ply membrane roof. It's considered that the proposal is entirely acceptable and policy constraints with regards to design and scale would not depart from the character of the host dwelling or the surrounding area. No concerns have been raised in regards to the impact the extension would have on the amenity of neighbouring dwellings by way of loss of light and overlooking and sense of overbearing scale. However, this must be given due consideration. Given the small scale of height of the proposal, it is not considered the extension would lead to an enlargement considered overbearing to such an extent that it would cause harm to the amenity of neighbouring dwellings. It's further noted that the existing garage is to be demolished and replaced with a single-storey extension. This would result in a loss of a single parking location. However, this will not, in my opinion, have an adverse effect on the amount of off-road parking, as there are sufficient parking spaces in front of the property. This therefore accords with the Core Strategy Policy Plan, MT1.
Although the application is within the Riverlug catchment, the proposed foul water outlets, it is considered that the proposal will not demonstrably increase in the intensification of the use of the property. There are no other matters pertaining to the proposal which require discussion or assessment, and taking the above into account, it's considered the proposal generally accords with the provision of the Herefordshire Local Plan core strategy, together with the overarching aims and objectives of the NPPF. In closing, as the proposed development complies with both Herefordshire core strategy policies and that there are no technical objections to the proposal, the proposed development is accordingly recommended for approval with the recommended conditions found in the officer's report. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. Sorry I didn't introduce you. Your name is Matthew Needleson. Welcome.
It is.
Yes. As we haven't got anyone, any speakers registered, can I please ask the ward councillor, Terry James, to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, this is there as dint of being a planning officer's application, and loath as I am to support a planning officer's application, I have to say there are no reasons why this should be refused, and I hope you'll move the recommendation and we can get a late lunch.
Councillor Simmons. Yes, sorry, we are moving to debate now.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is completely within scale. Seems entirely appropriate, good design. Fully agree with the recommendations from the report. There are no objections on the council website. Therefore, I move that we support the recommendation. Thank you.
Seconded Councillor Stone. Well, with that, sorry.
Madam Chairman, can I just ask, why has this come before committee?
Because he's an officer.
Very sorry.
Right, so we've had a proposer, we've had a seconder, and we now move on to the voting. Oh, you need to come back, sorry. Sum up.
Nothing to say.
Thank you. Right, so let's move on to the vote then. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? No, it's totally unanimous. Thank you very much. And
time is 1:45.
yeah.
Call this meeting. Close this meeting.
Yeah, 1:45. The meeting is now closed. Thank you.